I think your mic's off, but when you're ready, you can come in. Okay, we got another brother in the live. We got the other brother in the live. That's brilliant. Okay. No worries, Kamji. No worries at all. You can do that. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good. We're all here. Oh, this is good. All right. So let me just see if I'm showing up live on YouTube and people can hear me. Okay, that's good. Right, guys, I just add a few things to the presentation thing, and then I'll get us started.
Are we like live on your channel?
Yeah, I'm live right now. Yeah, sorry. So,
all good. I'm gonna save this.
Right. Hey, Tommy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Forgive me, guys, if my voice goes out tonight. It's because I'm still like I've been hit with a plague. I'm sure. Let me just turn my music down. I've been hit with a plague because it's been one thing after the other. It's been like this all started in like September with this cough that wouldn't go away. I think it was September, and then we looked into it, and we were looking into persistent cough, and turned out to be, long story short, the whooping cough. We've been corrected quite a few times. It's not whooping cough, it's whooping cough.
Whooping.
Yeah. But we've all got the whooping cough. Well, I tend to get things the worst. You look into it, this man flu thing is not a myth. It's actually a real thing. Apparently it hits us hardest. The man flu. So but yeah, I got it the worst, and then after that it was then flu season. So the whooping cough actually is there's also another name for it. It's called a 100-day cough. So you have it for like just persistent coughing and phlegm for about 3 months or over 3 months, and then it subsides. But right when it should be subsiding, we hit the flu season in Christmas, and I caught a new wave. So it's like I don't know whether God's judging me or something. I feel like I've been hit with the 10 plagues of Egypt right now, you know. But yeah, just forgive my voice.
I remember, when we did our live, I was coming over from something too. I don't know if it's the same thing or because a lot of people over here have been getting sick.
Right. With the same sort of symptoms then.
Yeah. And people are saying like it's COVID-25 or whatever, but
yeah,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, we've been hearing that there's a new thing in China. We don't want to say anything to upset the algorithm, but like it'd be interesting to see what new things the powers that be have in store for us, you know.
No, definitely. But with this knowledge is, timeless because, language is one of the ways that we can conserve our culture, and we could prove, the links that we have with classical civilizations, and it's pretty undeniable.
Definitely. So let me just introduce guys. So thank you if you're joining us now. That's good. I see 11 people watching right now, so we might as well just kickstart things off in the way of an introduction. The first live in the new year, just got to get that out of the way. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year to to the Trill Black Nation, and this is something that's been on my mind for a while. We kind of started it with the look into Hausa, the link between the Hausa language, which is I think the largest ethnic group. I don't like ethnic group or tribes or things like that, but I like to say nation. The largest African nation is the Hausa nation, which I didn't know till I started doing the preparation for that live. And we looked at the links between their language and the ancient Egyptian language, and we found out in 2.5 hours with the brother Amin, who I came to meet and know through the True Black endeavor. Through Instagram, actually. If you're not signed up, if you're not following True Black on Instagram, you absolutely need to do that. And then be added into a little group I've got going on Instagram where we collect intelligence information on the diaspora. And I met the brother through that, and he's a Nigerian American brother, and he's based in America. But he's got background, his ethnic background is Hausa, or Northern Nigerians. And that live was amazing, absolutely amazing, with the amount of knowledge that we delved into, the links between the Hausa language and the Egyptian language, the ancient Egyptian language. And we found that there's actually quite a lot that they miss out. So the experts miss out a lot in neglecting inner Africa and the links, the fact that you can't divorce the ancient Egyptians from Black Africa, that Black Africans, ancient Egyptians were Black Africans. In neglecting that fact, it's almost like they're cutting. There's a beautiful English expression, cutting your nose to spite your face. The whole Egyptology cartel cuts its nose off to spite its face by neglecting inner Africa when it's looking into Egypt and the history of ancient Egypt. We found in that live that there were things that started to make sense with the Egyptian language when you look at the Hausa link. It was amazing. I'm going to condense that live into a video. I absolutely have to, because new stuff has come to light even since then. So shout out to brother Amin, who is, I think his name is AHK Anu on Instagram if you want to follow him. But so yeah, that's where that started, and now we're moving into further down south into Africa, West Africa, still in Nigeria. My cultural background, which is Yoruba, I'm part of the Yoruba nation, and so we're looking at that. Next, we'll be looking at the links in East Africa, specifically Uganda, and I got something lined up for that as well. But for this live, I decided to invite back the brother Kamjiverse, everybody who is in space, is in this sphere of information. What's up, Infinite Rosetta? I see you. I see your comment there. What's up, Peace Chat? He says, what's up back to you? But yeah, so everyone who's in this space, you will know, there's no doubt that without a shadow of doubt, you will have heard of Kamjiverse. Even if you've forgotten that you've heard of Kamjiverse, you would have come across a Kamjiverse video. I'll let the brother Kamjiverse quickly reintroduce himself, and yes, then I also let our extra guest, our second guest, introduce himself as well. But yeah, go ahead, brother Kamji.
Yes. Appreciate Tro Black, for inviting me on again on this wonderful channel. I had a great time just discussing Bantu and some of the flaws of the scam of Bantu, the colonial scam on the last live that we did. And, for those of y'all who don't know, I'm Kamji. My channel is basically centered around linking modern Africa with classical Africa, particularly the Pharaonic civilization and the Pharaonic continuum during the dynastic era. But we also discuss things from, contemporary African politics, sometimes getting into relationships, spirituality, or whatever, topic I think is like fun, engaging, and influential. And, one thing that I pride my channel in is making the Chronologist mad. And chronologist, it's a word that I coined just to describe those who are fueled by self-hatred, who are dedicated to undermining the progress and the aspirations of the Adulawo, or the Ili Adulawo,
Well
the
done,
Black nation. And you're going to see some of them maybe come into this chat or have response videos to this, because whenever we go live, we always make them mad, and I pride myself in that. So I'm pleased to be on here, and I look forward to this engaging conversation.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Thank you for that, Kamji. Yeah, so that, just to recap, a recapitulation. I love that word. Ever since I rediscovered the fact that recap is short for recapitulation.
Yeah.
To recapitulate, that live was amazing as well. We looked at the falseness of the Bantu dichotomy. Yes, there are different there are differences in cultural in our culture as African and Black peoples, but I think when we looked at the genesis of the Bantu classification taxonomy, we found in that live that this is just for people who missed that live. You can go and check out that live after this is done, so I recommend that you do that. But we found that it was artificial. It was something that was created because it was convenient for colonialists to create it. Colonialists, particularly, who kept coming up against this wall of this connectivity, especially along the Eastern Corridor, Eastern Africa, north to south. They kept coming across this connectivity between Egypt and Inner Africa. And one of the things that was convenient to do was to start this classification of saying, well, the true Negro is based on the true Negro trope, which is these really dark Africans with very stereotypically Negroid features. They are Bantu, and they have nothing really. I say really, but in their worldview, it's nothing. Forget the word really, forget the superlative really. They have nothing to do with ancient Egypt. They are Bantu. And that was very convenient for them. Now, we found in that live that it was brought out. It was based on a video that Kamjiverse did on his channel. So check that video out as well, where he went into how actually it was. You went back to the originator of this, and you found the very specious grounds on which he based that. I actually have another live planned in which I'm going to be interviewing somebody who has who's from that cultural background, who the word Bantu is whose culture and language the word Bantu is from. And he or she got in touch with me soon after that live, based on that brilliant live and that brilliant information we got from Kamjiverse. She got back to me saying, look, I know for a fact that this word has been misrepresented and misused. This wasn't meant to be a thing that we classified ourselves by. It was just the word that meant people. It literally just meant people.
Yeah.
And she was very angry, very vexed in her email, and saying like there's so much more to this. So I said that I would have her on at some point in the future. But that was a great live, and it kind of intersects with what we're talking about today. Now, the brother I've got on as a second voice in this, or third voice, is my brother from the UK, brother Tommy, and his full name is Tomiwa. He's from the same heritage. He's from the same African heritage as I am, but you know, he's diaspora Nigerian like myself. He lives and works here in the UK. He's got family here, but he's back before. Let me just say this: back before. And let me know, chat, if my voice is waning. So, because again, like I said, I'm recovering from a cold. But back before, way before True Black was True Black, before I had a deep interest in this stuff, the brother Tommy here was onto a lot of these things that we're going to be discussing. And I remember a while back, me and Tommy go way back. He sent me the article that this live will be based on, and I just wasn't interested. I wasn't interested at the time. I actually thought it was far-fetched. So I owe Tommy an apology. This was years back now, but I owe you an apology because back then I thought, oh, it's far-fetched. Come on. There's no link. There's just no link between inner Africa, especially that deep into West Africa, the Yoruba nation and the ancient Egyptians. Fast forward to now, and you know, we're talking. I've got a channel based on this stuff, and I'm looking at the article that he sent to me a few years ago that I had no interest in back then. But yeah, so I'm gonna let the brother Tommy introduce himself, let him give a better account of himself, and then we'll get popping into the case study. Go on, Tommy.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Victor. So yeah, I'm my interest really is in the historical. So I think I share interest with Kamji from that point of view. I generally tend to be interested in classical history, regardless of location in the world. But I'm Yoruba, so I have a deep interest in my own history. And one of the things that I really sort of have had a desire for many years is what the actual histories of my people is. So I know a lot about the migratory history of my people, and I can name kings going back time immemorial, but I always wonder, where did they actually come from? So that's, I guess that was sort of my connection to this conversation tonight. And I came across years ago the connection with Northern Africa, Egypt, and I thought, yeah, the sounds interesting. But I found the linguistic connections very, very interesting and not coincidental. So that made me start thinking maybe there is some link here. And in our oral history of the Yoruba people, we essentially migrated from, some will say Mecca, some say North Africa, but there was a migratory movement down south towards to the Western Atlantic, where they settled today and created their civilization there. So how accurate that is, you don't know, but we know the language goes back, and language is almost the last thing you lose in any culture, because you sort of keep the language longest. So that's something I found interesting. So it'd be interesting to see how we dig and flesh that out in this conversation.
All right. Good stuff. Just take a look in I sent you a message in the private tab, Tommy. But yeah, we'll proceed, and I'm gonna just share with the stage the article. Now the article is, I see you smiling, Tommy. The article is by the great Theophile Obenga, and so I take it we've all read this article, but I'm just gonna take us through it. I'm gonna share my screen. Let me see. I can do this. Actually, I don't want to do it this way. Move. I'll present it another way. Okay. All right. Okay. There you go. All right. There you go. Sorry guys, we're just still getting used to all of this. It's all technical stuff to me. But that's not what I want to do. I'll get that up first and then we can go into it. Right.
As you're doing that, I just want to say that even some of the most conventional standard Afroasiatic linguist, and we know that Afroasiatic is a phantom. It's a myth of historical linguistics, but they will admit that the ancient Kemetic language, or Metrim and Kimi, is the closest to so-called Chadic, or the closest to a language like Hausa, to the extent that scholars like Elaine Anselin even suggested that that family be renamed Ethio-Chadic to account for that. So that's just one thing to consider when we're talking about, linguistics, is the fact that northern Nigeria has a closer relic than any other language on earth, to uncovering these sounds. And we'll see with Yoruba, if you could establish a relationship between Yoruba and Hausa, you can get the same thing with Yoruba as well.
Well, I was going to say this. One thing that we'll find is that they in discounting in Africa and the quote unquote Bantu languages, they miss out the tonality in the Egyptian language. I asked Google not long before this live just to confirm whether ancient Egyptian tongue was a tonal language. And of course, like the AI thing, which is they're testing out right now, which we know is here to stay. But the AI answered back at the top of Google saying, yes, indeed it was. And it's just clever software. It's just basically collating a bunch of opinions on the internet. So I went directly to those sources that it was collating from, and they kind of touched on it, but with no real depth. And that's part of the problem, because you've got a discipline that's dominated by people who have no real cultural grasp of what they're dealing with. If the ancient Egyptian tongue, like many African languages, was tonal, then quite a lot in Egyptology and in the understanding of that language is missing without consulting the wider continent. Do you feel what I'm saying there, guys?
No, definitely. That would be a huge misstep in uncovering a lot of the cognates, that are found with inter-African languages.
Tommy, can you tell us a bit more about that tonality aspect of things? I was going to play us a video, but I don't know that it's quite a long video. It's 20 minutes, but I was going to play snippets of it, but it was just talking about the tonality of the Yoruba. But I think you can explain that to us about the 3 different tones that we have in Yoruba, and just the significance of that.
Yeah, it makes a whole world of difference. So one letter or one word spelled with the same letters or same looking letters can give you 3 or 4 different meanings. So the word EGBA, or rather I'll use IGBA. So Igba, Igba, right? Igba, Igba is I believe that's garden egg. Igba is time. Igba is a god, like a dish, like a bowl. So it's the same spelling. So Egyptologists might be looking at, and this theory is very interesting. And I know that they've backfilled using modern Coptics to sort of help them sort of reconstruct what they think the ancient Egyptians sounded like, because of the Egyptians just have consonants, but the vowels were not shown. So it's difficult to see what they filled those consonants with, number one, but also what those consonants sound like, because the consonants make all the difference in language. So language like Yoruba, you change the sound of the vowel, rather. You change the sound of that vowel, and it's completely different meaning. So that means that there's probably a whole world of Egyptian linguistics that is still essentially missing or hidden from us because of that lack of knowledge of the impact of the vowels in the language. So I don't know if that sort of touches on what you're saying.
Precisely. And this will be clear as we look at this article. Right, I got everything set up. You can see that on the screen. And I just do a quick shout out to the comments that we're getting in here. Mr. Black Gold says, will I open the panel up later? Do you know what? Once we got past I don't want it to get too distorted, and like they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. So we will first get through what we need to get through pronto, and then if we got time and if brothers aren't too tired and they want to stay on, I will actually do that. I'll invite you into the chat if you're still here. So let's go ahead and cook on this topic. So we got this article by Theophile Obenga, who I discovered is 90 years of age right now, I think. And so, my goodness,
I thought he was in his like mid 80s. I didn't know he was that old.
I think he's probably going to turn 90 by my calculation. Wow. He's 1930 something. Wow. Dude. So yeah,
that's crazy.
So yeah, and I think when the most recent interviews I've seen of him, he's still quite got a pep in his step. He's still doing well.
Can you make the screen a little bit bigger?
What's that? The PDF itself?
Yeah, and you might want to hide the comment so people can see the full PDF. Yeah, like saying it's sort of blocking the screen.
Okay, cool. I get what you're saying. Okay, let me do that. Yeah. Just get that out of the way.
Happy New Year to No BS. Shout out to y'all in the chat. And yeah, I don't agree with the 60% Greek loans because like there's a difference between cultural words and like basic lexical items. Which Coptic does have like a lot of Semitic and Greek, but I don't think it's that high. That's pretty high. 60% is crazy.
Right, let's get started in this article. Right, so I've got the comment out of the way from Yars Very Real. So if I think, can I make that bigger? Okay, I'll just zoom in a bit better. Okay. I am. I don't know if anyone's seen that meme of the old lady with the computer. It's a very old meme. It's an old white lady squinting at a computer screen, and it's just got many different stuff that's people just insert into like the just different comments that people insert onto the actual image. But I am that old lady when it comes to tech, and I feel like I'm getting more and more further and further away from whatever is out there.
It's not too bad if you full screen it and the whole page, which is fun. Like I can see.
I'm gonna close. All right. What about now?
I just asked ChatGPT for whatever it's worth, and they said it's 10% of Coptic is Greek.
Okay. Right, this is what I'll do. I'll stretch that out there. Can I move that? I'll move that. Right, I got rid of that. Cool.
And yeah,
I hope that's clearer.
It looks clear to me. Someone in the chat talking about Hebrew. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I don't think that there's a deep connection.
Okay. As Yon Romano, he says, what do you know about the Yoruba Paleo? Well, let's get through the Egyptian connection, and we might, if we got time, we'll talk about that. But hold that thought, Azion. Thank you very much. Nice to see you here. First time I've seen that name in a live here, but thank you for joining us. Right. Any language in the world does not change its tradition from its birth to its death. Greek language, with its many dialects through time and space since the Mycenaean idiom, will always remain Greek and never some other language, like Phoenician or Latin. Likewise, Yoruba has been always Yoruba since the remote past. If Yoruba and ancient Egyptian pharaonic language show very close sound correspondences between them, it means that the two languages are genetically related. Now, Theophile will go on to explain this genetic correlation better in this piece. But Kamji, do you have anything to say about that that statement there that I've highlighted?
Yeah, no, I mean everything every time I have this conversation, people think that genetic relation means like biology, but obviously, like in linguistics, it means something different. It's basically referring to the systematic correspondences in the vocab at a phonological and morphological level, primarily. And when you see the correlation between Yoruba and Egyptian, it's so much that it can't be due to chance. Like chance is like a one off or a two off, but when you start to get into like 20, 30, 40 correspondences, you have to at the very least describe the mechanism of borrowing, or just admit that the two languages are genetically related, meaning that they come from the same ancestor. So yeah.
And when we say genetically related, I want to talk genetics in a biological sense. We're talking about at the very base level of existence, of biological existence. Now, that's the same when you carry it over to linguistics. He will go on to explain this, but let me give a quick Reader's Digest. We're talking basic words here. We're not talking words that could have been loaned, like such as English is quite notorious for this. English absorbs as absorbed other languages. I know I got a comment ironically. You get them whenever this topic is being discussed. You get it all the time. But hurt types will come in and say things. I think it was on a video about scripts, and the guy was in the comments, ignorant comments, and yeah, well, you still use the English script and whatnot, but unbeknownst to that person, the English script isn't actually the English script. It's borrowed. It's itself a Latin script, and that itself is borrowed ultimately from the Egyptians. So scripts are a very weird thing. It's like in the history of human civilization, human beings are busy for the most part surviving. So for the most part, we just borrow from other cultures and we develop from other cultures. Think about it. In the whole of Europe, what they use is not an English script, it's a Latin script. Actually, it's actually a Latin script. So my point here is that to take that to a linguistic element, English is quite dynamic for that. That's one of its strengths. But another that can be seen as quite lazy, because actually English absorbs quite a lot. There's a lot of words in English at a deeper level, at a higher level, that are just compositions of other languages, literal Latin, Greek, even African languages, voodoo, mumbo jumbo stuff,
Banana,
Arabic words
Indian,
that are
Arabs,
brought into barracuda. I discovered is not a European word. It actually goes back to West Africa, our word for shark. And so you've got that in the English language. Whereas what we're talking about when we say genetically related, we're talking about a base level, very basic words. What Theophile Obenga says there is, if Yoruba and ancient Egyptian, I'll repeat that sentence, pharaonic language, so very close sound correspondences, it means that the two languages are genetically related. We'll carry on and we'll see how that's further on demonstrated. But I just want to do a quick shout out to I think we just got a super chat, and that is from Black Rampage. Thank you so very much. He says 2024 you cooked, stay in the kitchen, chef. Thank you, brother. Black Rampage, that's $20 straight from the US of A. Thank you so much for that, Black Rampage 2. Okay, so we are gonna go back to this article. Tommy, sorry, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I mean, I think you guys have captured it well. The fact that the comparison here is done at a very sort of fundamental level of the language, and that connection, I think Kamji captures that also very well, which is when you start to get that trend, that pattern of similarities. You're no longer talking about something that's just happened by pure luck. You're now saying there's something that's happened in the past where these, which are massive. In front of me, I've got a picture of a map of the whole world, and you can see Egypt and you can see like West Africa, Nigeria, and you can see we're quite separated by a number of countries. But the fact that this language at the very base level, the similarities that tells you that something's happened, and there was some interactions in the past. So you can't chalk it up to coincidence
at all. Right, I've got to move on. Indeed, chance similarities between two or more languages do not obey to any system. Mr. Theophile Obenga is a francophone African, so he's writing in a language that is like 3 removed now. So you will find some grammatic irregularities in this article. So, but that's just by the by, just as a little warning. He says, indeed, chance similarities between 2 or more languages do not obey to any system. That is, there is no regularity by mere chance or at random. Let us be more explicit. Phonetic laws and sound correspondences have exceptions, but their help is very crucial in eliminating false etymologies and dubitable reconstructions. For example, Greek theos, God, and Latin deus, God, seem to be very similar, therefore related, and developed from a common pre-dialectal stock. To technically decide, the following question must be answered. In what context or environment, that is, in what linguistic conditions, Latin D corresponds to Greek theta? And then he goes off demonstrating what he's saying there, which is essentially what I feel like. Kamji, you're better placed to explain this because you said something a while back. You have a beef with pseudo linguistics, so you might
Yeah.
be you might be best put to explain what he's saying there with this phonetic fallacies there.
Yeah, well, basically what he's saying there is that even though words may look similar, you have to be really specific in understanding like the phoneme and morpheme boundary. And you also have to be able to describe the different phonetic transition. Like in the case of Theos, Obenga has another article where he presents a pretty valid argument that it descends from a Kemetic word for image in tit or tit, right? And though it may sound super similar to Dios, and many people have, anticipated that since they sound similar and since, they mean something similar, theology being related to the study of God and Dios obviously meaning God, they must be related. But if you can't describe the specific phonetic law that led to from the pre-dialectical ancestor to the descendant, then that's not a valid argument in historical linguistics.
Right. He goes on to say, I'm going to skip quite a few just paragraphs just so we can get through this. He says, I'll go to the highlighted bit. He says, thus the task of historical linguistics is basically grounded in the hypothesis of the regularity of phonetic laws and sound correspondences. What I read into that is it's a numbers game. It's a statistical thing. On a statistical level, if you keep seeing the same rules again and again and at a fundamental level, you are likely dealing with a language that has the same roots, from the same family. A series of lexical facts is always required in order to eliminate chance similarities. A series of lexical data gives to the comparison its systematic appearance. Blah, blah, blah. He says, 2 or more languages from the same geographical area give a lot of problems to the linguist because regularity can be due to contamination, dialect mixture, influence, borrowing of technical terms. For example, Greek and Latin influence is shown in Oscan deities. He says, I actually want to stop there. He's saying there, just to explain that bit, he's saying, and correct me anyone if I've got this wrong or you've got a better twist on it. He's saying that languages from the same sort of geographical area can sometimes look like they've got they're linked because, well, they've got similar sounding words, similar words, whatever. But he's saying there that actually that can be just due to later borrowing from each other, cross-cultural contamination. And that's something that I have to watch for. I had to watch for looking into this because you can say, well, for example, you can say the Yoruba peoples and the Asante peoples are related because they've got this and that similar, but not necessarily, because that could have just come about from through later interactions with each other and borrowing of words, such as English has done with many other languages. So but in this case, Obenga goes on to say ancient Egyptian pharaonic language and modern Yoruba language are chronologically and geographically two distant languages. So if we find links between these two languages, fundamental links between these two languages, then it, based on how far geographically the two nations, the two places are from each other, it's likely not to be cross contamination or artificial cross contamination. It's likely, as he goes on to say, however, if we find regularity in comparing them, the conviction of their common ancestrality becomes more and more probable. They belong to the same linguistic tradition and community, although their historical and spatial depth might be enormous. Brother Tommy, I don't know if you got anything to say there.
No, I think that's fair. Again, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was potentially maybe there was some type of cross fertilization through trade and interaction. But the thing that, yeah, I find I so struggled is that this a massive geographical distance between both peoples, or both the, the ancient Egyptians and the Yorubas, that it feels quite far-fetched to say a lot of that linguistic so translation was done by, so trades and interaction. It feels like more maybe at some time they were one and the same people, or came out of that area and then maybe migrated to a different area once to carry the language. So that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tommy. Kamji, also, you did a video. I was watching. I've not finished watching it. It's on my to-do list. But you did a video. I can't remember what it was, about the ancient Egyptian and the slave trade or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And in it, I think you mentioned about how, you mentioned how there are several migrations. There were several migrations out of Egypt,
Yes.
and this would account for why we find, and in different directions, and this would account for why we find just links throughout inner Africa or to the ancient Egyptian tongue in different ways.
Yeah, no, this article is important because, as I stated before, when you have such a large number of connections, you rule out chance. You completely rule out chance. Now, if you want to deny that there is a deep relationship and that they are part of the same language family, as many chronologists try to do, you still have to describe the mechanism by how there's so many similarities in different phonetic and morphological categories. And just saying that, oh, they migrated from here to there, that's not enough, because you have to describe, okay, how did they get the same or similar words for weaving? What did they do in the case of ironworking? What did they do in the case of horseback riding? Like, you have to describe all those mechanisms. And for these skeptics, it's just almost impossible to do that without any archaeological or genetic or external evidence. It's much more easier and logical to accept that the fact that with all of these connections, they come from the same ancestor. Like, that's the easiest explanation to conclude.
Thank you for that. Shout out to Mr. Black Gold with a £5 super chat. Pay my dues and respects. 2025 is our year. I say a big amen to that. Let's from your lips to the creator's ears. Okay, so let's get back to this piece. In his classification of African languages, the great scholar Joseph H. Greenberg completely missed this crucial point of comparative method, that is, correspondences and laws of sound change. Therefore, his classificatory models are not required by the rigors of the comparative method. there is no systematic sound correspondences across African languages investigated. Greenberg's method is simply the technique of the description of mass comparison without comparative method. Now, I'm going to summarize that in very, 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 like, probably limited layman terms. What I understand him saying in that paragraph, his critique of Greenberg in that paragraph, is that there hasn't been a detailed study. There's been a kind of perfunctory glazing over in terms of classifying African languages, but there hasn't been a comparative analysis done of them. So it's going to be like the conclusions of people like Greenberg. I'm not privy to the plethora of works that he produced on this, but the comparisons are going to be shallow. I think is what he's saying there. I don't know if I'm right there, but I did do some research on Greenberg. Now, Greenberg was actually interesting. Greenberg, I'm gonna share something else with with us, and it is, let's go. I'll stop sharing this, and it's just about who Greenberg was. It was a great linguist. It was an amazing linguist, but he actually had some. Let me see if I can share an image of him. Okay, so there's an article that speaks about his contributions, and I'm not gonna go into it because it's just trying to share the screen on that is just another whole palaver. But what I'm gonna say is he was a great linguist, known for his work on North American languages, Native American languages, and African languages. However, he ran into some trouble with when he said his main controversy was criticizing this idea of migration across the Bering Straits. So I'll just summarize this for people as best as I can. There's a theory that the peopling of America happened across the Bering Straits, and in the Bering Straits is a northerly stretch that they theorize of land that they theorize was in place thousands of years ago, whereby people came over from Russia. Nomadic peoples came over from Russia, from that northern stretch into America, into the north of America, helped along by the fact that there was solid ice in that period, that and there was less water, which allowed for some stretch of land. So that land, combined with a long, large, massive geographical stretch of ice, allowed the peopling of America from the north. Now, in doing this, these folk have actually they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, because here's what I find funny about this. Now, you have the peopling of America, according to this theory, which could well have happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Greenberg's point was that it couldn't have happened as often as people state, because by his theory of languages, he classified the North American language groups, the Native American language groups of North America, into three major groups, families. And he said this evidences three major migrations across the Bering Strait. Okay, if you believe it actually existed. Now, he ran into controversy because people said, no, there are at least 200 main North American language groups, native North American language groups that we can find, fundamental. And he said, well, and they were saying on that side, they were saying, thus we believe that there were numerous, about 200 of these major migrations. But he said, his quote at the time was something like, well, if this is true, you'd need a traffic control. You'd have need a traffic controller at the Bering Strait, because this is ridiculous. Like, you can't have, over such a harsh terrain, you can't have a migrate, like so many hundreds, so many events, migration events of people across such a harsh terrain. Now, here's my point with this. I'm actually on the side that it's possible for people to have migrated that many times. It's possible. But the hypocrisy is that when it comes to inner Africa and a less harsher terrain, a terrain that Africans have for millennia mastered, see the Tuareg, see the Berbers, for millennia mastered, they claim, no, you couldn't possibly do it. You couldn't possibly have migrated so many times across the Sahara, whereas they're telling us thousands and thousands of years ago, before man mastered different animals, beasts, and methods of travel, that actually people were crossing this icy north geographical area to the tune of hundreds of times. I don't know, chat. I don't know. Does anyone see the problem?
I see what
there?
you're saying. I see what you're saying. Like, it's hypocritical to have one standard for the Americas and then like remove the standard for Africa.
Yeah. But these are very, very, very educated people that it's very hard to convince them of their own bias, because apparently, they're not biased and they're just experts seeking the truth. But I just found that very, very interesting. But yeah, that was Greenberg's take on that whole controversy, and I thought that was interesting that he should fall on that side of that debate. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Tommy.
Oh, I've got nothing to add to that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna put back the Obenga article here. So we go on. For a scholar like Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski, 1848 to 1942, everything from non-Western world was primitive. Hieroglyphic script and Egyptian grammar, primitive languages, blah, blah, blah. Basically, Bronislaw was, again, another racialist, masquerading as an academic. He didn't see the value in any sort of quote unquote primitive groups and their languages, and he called them primitive. And I think he had a theory as to the reason and language that didn't favor us too well, African peoples. But
did it just out of interest? Did it consider the Egyptian scripts and hieroglyphics primitive?
No, he didn't. But then I think by not doing that, he divorced it obviously from the African. So like I was reading an article again. I was reading an article by a Ovid Sellers, I think was a theological linguist, and he was comparing very briefly the Egyptian tonality with African tonality. And I think he said something like, "We can't compare the two. The similarities only go so far, because one is primitive and one is very high." I just thought because it was ironic, because I was looking for articles, detailed articles on the tonality of ancient Egyptian, and he could come so far as to say, "Oh wow, they're tonal just like the African languages are," but he couldn't go as far as to then say, well, that means there might be somewhat of a link. So he just glazed over that part with that kind of a comment. But it's constantly happening. Bronislaw is actually, if you look him up, he's a he's a heavyweight in anthropology. Polish heavyweight in anthropology, and his work still influences anthropology till today. Similarly, but to a lesser extent, the other guy, Sellers. And this is the thing again, is that we can't these studies and disciplines can't begin to properly do their work without admitting to the corruption of these influences. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, they're racist. You know, their linguistics is like one of the many branches of anthropology rooted in colonialism.
Yeah, yeah. So it's something that, I mean, is there, and as black peoples, we just have to move past and ignore, because if you're taking a lot of these Western sources as, I mean, everyone has bias. Everyone has bias. We have bias doing this right now. We've got bias for a particular worldview that we're trying to shed, but the difference is we own that bias and we believe there's evidence to back that bias. um Ubiquitous evidence, uh plain evidence, but the other side doesn't believe it's got bias. It doesn't believe it's touched by a history of bias, and that's the difference. Whenever you come to these debates, I find the most useful debates are had when people on both sides first lay down their biases, and say, look, this is what this is what you're dealing with when you're coming to me with your arguments, and this is where I'm coming from. But if we pretend all the time like, oh no, I'm just here for the study and whatnot, and I'm not colored by this and that, then I don't know, this doesn't bode well. So
Indeed.
here it says, consequently, all ethnographic linguistic data, grammars, and dictionaries written in 18th to 19th centuries on African languages must be used. This is the point we just made, with extreme forethought.
Yep.
Right. Sorry, do you want to say something, Kamji?
No, I mean that's facts. Like, and I'd even add that like not only are most of them like Christian, but they're like a particular racist, Calvinistic Western Christianity that's influenced in them. Like they don't mention the influence of African Christians in their work. They just try to have their own colonial agenda.
Mm.
There's so there's an interesting point in that, but I'll come to that later. We've got time. For example, and I've highlighted this purple for a reason. I'm hoping that anyone can chime in. You can come in anytime I'm talking here. So Tommy, if you got something to say, please feel free. For example, Christian missionaries have translated the word okue in Bantu Mbonchi Congo by evil, or to evil, or devil, demon. In fact, says Theophile Obenga, okue, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly, plural, ikue, means a dead or dead person or dead man who has
It sounds
become to be a powerful spirit in the afterlife. The Egyptian correspondent is Ak,
Yeah.
to
Wow.
become a spirit of Ra in the afterlife, or Aku, power of a god, etc. The concept of power, glory, mastery is the preeminent meaning of the word Okue. I got something pretty key, pretty interesting on this, but I'll let you guys chime in here first.
it sounds when I saw that, it reminds me of Oku in my
Oh my
language.
goodness. There we go.
Oku literally means dead, the dead.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I just thought that sounds like Oku. So it's yeah.
Go on, Kamji.
Yeah, I think I have a cognate list of a word that I may think is similar, but just in general, like it just goes back to, us needing to control our own language and literature. Because another example that I can think of off the top of my head is Nzambi being God for the Kikongo people. And, that basically became zombie or like an evil dead thing in European
Wow.
languages. So like we could find numerous instances of this occurring across the continent.
Wow. So what Tommy said there was actually, so I thought the same thing. I thought exactly the same thing. Our word for dead is oku, and um, or if you that's a dead person, and iku is just death. And again, I can't remember what you said about this, Kamji, but you're talking about something quite technical last time we were here, and it wasn't so much it wasn't so much the before and after vowels, but the consonant in the middle. And you see that with this word with the Egyptians as well, the ak, that k that k, I don't know if it's a glottal sound or whatever, but it's
the
present.
velar.
Right. And it's just, again, it's the first thing. It's the first. This is the first instance in this article where I thought, okay, this guy, this is going to be interesting, because he makes this point later in the article. This is a very basic word. Every civilization has its own word for the dead or dead things, right? What are the chances that they're not going to be borrowed? Okay, so very basic words like this, very basic things aren't going to be borrowed. They're going to be things that either, if you see similarities, this is indicating a family group of languages, and you have that here. I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I want to add, like, in Medumba, which is the language that is my parents' language. Dead is ku. So, like, there's a obvious correspondence on that initial velar with Yoruba oku, and then with ak in Metrem and Khmer, the ancient Kemetic language. So it's just validating, the Paleo-African continuity.
Wow. So, can you tell us what you said this the last time we were talking? You mentioned how your heritage goes back to actually Ife, the Ile-Ife in Yoruba land. Am I misremembering that, Kamji?
No, that's my family is West Cameroonian.
Okay, sorry.
So the Bamilekes and the Bamums. Now, there actually is a relationship, with the Yoruba people. If you look at Oranmiyan and some of the siblings of Oranmiyan and his cousins and uncles and nephews, according to the research of the scholar Dika Akwanya Bonambela, who is a famous Cameroonian archaeologist and historian. If you were to look at Mwenya, which would be, under certain oral traditions, Oranmiyan's grandfather, his brother would be the ancestor of the Mandara people, the Bamum people, and the Bamileke people of northern and western Cameroon. So, like, in that sense, from an orator perspective, there's a relationship. But this linguistic relationship is going to be revelatory on the other end, just to see how similar, these languages are, when it comes to the basic vocabulary.
And even the word Bamileke, it could very easily be a Yoruba word. That's a Yoruba name,
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
That's a Yoruba name, Bamileke.
Yeah, Tommy knows that. Tommy knows that Bamileke. Tommy's from the Ile-Ife crowd. That's where the Yorubas believe that their immediate origins in that region of West Africa is. So can you talk about that, Tommy, just a little bit? The whole Ile-Ife thing.
Yeah. So the story goes that the Yorubas call themselves the children of Odua. Odua is the equivalent of Abraham to the Yoruba peoples. But Odua's father was a prince called Lamrudu, and Lamrudu was the son of a sorcerer or whatever, Kursi. And the idea is that they came from that sort of eastern or north east part of Africa, and they would essentially, for whatever it was, war, whatever, they were displaced, and then there was this migration that went down south. And then Odua essentially established and settled in Ile-Ife. Now, Ile-Ife could either mean house of love, which mean Ile-Ife, or Ile-Ife could mean house of expansion. However, that's where they settled. And then Odua then had princes, and those princes were the ones that essentially established dominions in the Yoruba nation states around the region. So that is why Ile-Ife is seen as the heartland. It's kind of like what the Vatican is to the Roman Catholics. What Ile-Ife is the spiritual home of all Yoruba people. So that's the best I can describe it.
Thank you. Can I reveal the special bit, your special connection to all of this, Tommy, or should I save that for another time?
Do that.
No. In fact, okay, good. So I've got your permission. I'm gonna go back to you. You have you have special links to this, don't you? Because you have ancestry that goes back to not really even ancestry. Your direct lineage goes back to the original kings of Ile-Ife, don't they, Tommy?
So my grandfather my grandfather was a prince of Ile-Ife. His mother was the last female ruler of Ile-Ife. She was Deboye. She was the daughter of the 45th Oni of Ile-Ife. Now, Oni is the title of the kings of Ile-Ife. Now, the Onis, only the Onis possessed the title, which means first son of Odua, or in my language, Arole Odua. And that is an acknowledgement that all the kings of Ile-Ife are descended from Odua, and his son Oromiyan, who was the one that established the dynasty in Oyo, which we know the famous Oyo Empire. But Oromiyan was also credited for the one to establishing the dynasty in the empire and the kingdom of Benin, the first Oba. So there's that connection with those massive empires. But my heritage goes to the house of Oni in Ile-Ife.
And this is all very, very interesting because it's a subject for another live. But just briefly, I'll say this idea that this is one of the things that, especially coming from a legal background, we learned here in law school, in university here, about the fact that the purported fact that Britain has the mother of parliaments, and the Western world, the Western hemisphere, is to be lauded for having a constitutional system of governance and checks and balances. You have that in America also, this idea of checks and balances. But this is interesting what Tommy's saying, and I think you know about this as well, Kamji.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not true, because a long time before they settled that system here in this part of the world, we had a very intricate system of governance, which meant that it was a constitutional monarchy. Really, it was based on, you had a spiritual, and this is what I believe, this is part of what allowed the Oyo peoples, the Yoruba peoples, to then spread out and have the empire that it did. Order breeds prosperity. Order and just regimented things being centralized and regimented and disciplined breeds prosperity. And we were quite regimented in our system of governance. You had the spiritual, basically the Pope, the Pope of Yoruba land was in Ile-Ife. The political sort of, the executive power went out to the Alaafin of Oyo, which is the king. He would then be like the, I don't know, the practical leader. So you've got the Pope in Rome, and you've got the Oni of Ife in Ife. Then you've got the Charlemagne, let's say Charlemagne there in France with his empire, and that equivalent would be the Alaafin of Oyo. And that system, you had a system whereby the king, the Alaafin of Oyo, wasn't just a monarch who could do what he wanted. He was answerable back to the spiritual head in Ife. He couldn't just do whatever he wanted, because the Oni of Ife, the people, the Oni of Ife could at any one time, if the king was going beyond his bounds, basically demand that the emperor at Oyo commits ritual suicide.
Yeah.
And literally that was it. If you were seen to be a king abusing your position, there would be a council called, which I think was the Oyomesi, Tommy.
Oyomesi, yes.
Oyomesi,
yeah,
a council of the king's nobles, and they would be called, and they would say whether or not the king's gone too far, and they would present the king with an ultimatum: commit ritual suicide or we'll remove you. You've gone too far. And so the king couldn't do whatever he wanted. It was never like, and this whole system, actually, ironically, the whole system fell apart because people weren't respecting tradition anymore.
Correct.
People,
Yeah.
you had kings who thought, and you had generals who thought
Ashurunga.
who thought they could do what they wanted.
Yeah.
They were enticed by the slave trade, the lucrativeness of the slave trade, what the Northerners were doing with the Islamic empires of Danfodio, and then people started disrespecting their own cultural practices, and that's when it all fell apart. But that's a whole nother live. I don't know. Sorry if anyone wants to quickly add anything to that. Tommy, if you want to do that.
Yeah, that's definitely a very interesting part of the sort of Yoruba history, and the fact that that constitutional monarch was there. It wasn't like an imperial monarchy where the king could do whatever they want to do, and that also was similar even in Ile-Ife, where the chiefs had the power to tell the king, "All right, you've had enough now." And I have stories about this in Ife history too. So yeah, interesting that we had this established system of governance for apparently primitive people long before it was established in sort of European cultures.
Yes, yeah. And in fact, you could have what was I going to say? It was also the case that the king's children, or if the king's son wasn't an automatic shoe-in for the position, he had to be confirmed by the council of the Oyomesi, and if he wasn't found worthy enough, they'd give it to someone else. And
Yeah.
it didn't have to be in the line of that same king. Just an interesting comment from Soul Poster here. Oromiyo, also known as Oronyo, was a legendary Yoruba king from the kingdom of Ile-Ife and the founder of the Benin kingdom and the Oyo Empire. So that itself, that system spread out and created a sort of, not a tributary, because the Benin kingdom itself became its own empire in its own right, a distinct and mighty kingdom in its own right. But the Benin peoples come out of this tradition of Ile-Ife. In fact, our languages cross over quite
Correct.
a lot of ways. So thank you for that, Soul Post. I've not seen you before, but good to have you with us here in the chat. Okay, so let's move on. I've got a note here. So Theophile Obenga starts to go off into like details, okay? And he goes, this section is called Lexical Correspondences by Plain Labial Stop B Initial. And this is just a list of words that correspond with the ancient Egyptian. Now, the first word here, ba, to germinate, the Yoruba word to germinate, agrarian world, I couldn't find. I racked my head for. I thought, oh, we're not off to a great start, because I actually don't know. I actually don't know what this word is. I consulted one of the oldest Yoruba to English to Yoruba dictionaries we have, and that also disagreed. So I don't know what he's talking about here. The corresponding ancient Egyptian word is ba here, to hoe crops. I've got a note here that I wrote down, okay, and I think it's important. Who is the word known to me? Okay, kinko who, to grow something or to germinate from the ground. In Yoruba we say anhu nkan. So we're growing something, or esohu, Latinu lewa. That's the word I know. Okay, but nota bene, the tonality of Yoruba and many West African languages help to explain the multiplicity of the same seeming sounds, similar sounds for different meanings in Medu Necha. So, for example, I might not know what this word ba means right now, okay? But kind of, okay, so I'll just kind of read my note and then I'll explain. This may explain why some seemingly monosyllabic and monotonal sounds seem foreign to a native speaker. So, for example, you might think, that's such a basic word, ba, okay? Why wouldn't you know if you can recognize it? Well, because it depends on the tone, okay, of how you say this word. And even anglicized tonalities that we modes of tonalities that we use aren't sufficient, I've found, for actually explaining for executing the tones on our speech. So at some point we're gonna have to develop our own complete, like, I think we have done that, but we need to popularize it, and it needs to displace the Latin scripts. But we have to develop our own scripts, because I think the Latin scripts and the Latin tonalities that we symbols that we use for tonality are insufficient. Now, this word "ba" might Theophile Obenga might not have made a mistake here. It's just might be foreign to me. Now, you might say, but that's like, that's a foreign person might say that's basic. Like, why wouldn't you know whether you've heard that? Well, in English, for example, I've got here a big technical speciated word in Yoruba is not necessarily, as in English, long and drawn out. So this might be another word. What I mean there is this might actually be another word for growing something, to germinate something. However, just like in English, you could be talking to, we take for granted how in English, someone could use the word idiosyncratic, and or a word vicissitudes, and you think, well, what the heck does that mean? And the vicissitudes just means the ups and downs of life, and you could say, why didn't you just say that, brother? But in English, the more complex a word is, the longer it is, the more syllables it has. And we all in the room, when we hear it for the first time, we say, oh wow, well, that's a big word, brother. That's oh my goodness, you're busting out the dictionary. But in Yoruba and in tonal languages, the more speciated, the more technical the word, doesn't necessitate the word being longer. It just means, it may just mean, and quite often actually, not may, just means that a different tone or inflection is put on the same monosyllabic word. Just the same word, but a different sound to it, and you've changed the whole, and there's a new word you never heard. This happens to me all the time, as I'm a young diasporan Yoruba boy living in the United Kingdom, and my mom will say something, or the old heads will say a word that I've never heard before. But you think, how have you never heard that word before? It's literally just sounds like, to the untrained ear, it just sounds like the other word. Yeah, I've never heard it because it's a different tone, a different inflection put on that word. Does that make sense to anyone in the chat? So what I'm just explaining why this word might seem foreign to me. It might be a more specific word used, a more technical word used by agriculturalists in Yoruba land that I've never heard of, but I just know the common term, which is to germinate, that who to who something. But Theophile Obenga says it corresponds to the ancient Egyptian to hoe in relation to crops. Tommy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, if I've butchered that explanation.
No, and I think the question that came to mind really when I saw this was, does he have a GB? Is it GBA type of word that has more remote, so that is less used, but is related to the word?
Stop it right now. Sorry. Stop it right now. I discovered see, this is the thing. Something's been lost in translation. Theophile Obenga is a francophone, a Congolese man with his own, what he's done is made more power to him, but he's made a few errors here, and we'll see what happens. With due respect, and humbly I say that becomes apparent to the Yoruba speaker as you read this article going forward. There are a few words he doesn't quite spell. The word you're saying there, were you going towards be? It
could be be. So so because I looked at that and I thought, and I went through different iterations of ba, and I thought that doesn't make sense. But what if you put a GB in there? Because we have the sound b, which is GB, right? Then you get a different meaning, really. So yeah, could be a lost in translation thing from
wow.
Yeah,
that is literally what's going on here. I'm convinced of it. So the word that Theophile Obenga wants to and it's a very complex, if that's the word, it's a very complex word to translate into English, into the English tongue. It's a GB sound, and it's not a straight B sound. It's a word that if you're not familiar with, you will run amok. It will run you aground, and it's a b b b. Gbe, can you gbe konga? That's the
So
digger well,
yeah.
right?
So
Or
a farmer is called agbe.
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 Oh
Yeah,
my
that's a farmer is
goodness.
called agbe.
I'm done. I'm done. Oh my goodness. I didn't see it. And that's the word that that's the word that he's talking about here. It's a GB. It's almost like a B sound.
So
But
like a
again,
B sound, yeah.
yeah. And that's interesting to me. That's interesting to me that the ancient Egyptians had their word for digging or to hold something in relation to crops is that ba, or I don't know what that symbol is, that first symbol, B, and the two that looks like a 3. But I'd be interested to know if it's a
So
bear
so
sound as
so
well.
so
Like
yeah.
alveolar trill.
Go on,
Sorry,
Kamji.
so go on, Kamji.
It's a sign that many believe represents the alveolar trill sound in phonetics, but that necessarily hasn't been proven all the way. I think it's most similar to like an open A sound in phonetics, but it's been debated over like what exactly that's supposed to mean.
Are you talking
Right.
about the foot? The
Yeah,
the
that
foot,
that
the
three
leg.
that phonetic.
Oh, the 3.
Three sound.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
like a kind of sound.
Right.
Okay.
And well, there's more to delve into, so we won't get bogged down there. Right, let's go on. You've got, and again, this is now we're just reeling off the similarities according to this paper.
And
So
by the
you
way,
can
but before you continue, first off, shout out to Yashua for that 2-pounder on the chat. And then
sugar, I missed it.
Madumba to germinate would be like bid. So like a little, not this exactly the same, but like kind of similar to the Yoruba gba, be bid. Same thing, germinate ho. Same thing.
Right. So oh sugar, I can't I will get back to that. I will get to that super chat. Sorry, I missed it. But okay, so we have the next word here is boo or boo. B. It's I don't know if we need someone who's I don't know how you'd pronounce that, Kamji, but
Which one? The W?
The second one, number 2.
yeah, the second one, and it starts with a BW. But
Yeah, just boo. Just boo.
boo. Okay.
Mhm.
This the word there, that the equivalent in Yoruba is ibi, that's place.
Mm.
Okay.
Or
And
ibudu.
who said that?
That's me.
Tommy.
Like ibudu is like home, like your place of where you reside.
Wow, talk to me. Oh my,
Yeah,
ibusun.
that's what. Yeah, or ibudu. Like that's where you sleep. That's where you lay your head.
The place where you lay your head, or the place where you live, ibudu. Wow.
Or your
You see,
locality. Yeah.
oh my goodness. This is incredible. Okay, we'll move on. He says be good deed. I couldn't really get that. I couldn't really get the
To give birth to.
yeah, to give. I know that to be is in Yoruba is to give birth to, but I didn't understand how that corresponded with the Egyptian.
Yeah.
Be
It's a semantic
looking the good
field.
deed.
So it doesn't have to
Right.
necessarily be like sometimes in ancient Egyptian, fire will correspond to burn or hot in the African language. So as
Right.
long as if it's in the semantic field, you can have a cognate correspondence.
Oh, so that's what he means by semantic
Right,
evolution there then.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
okay. 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 Okay, and then you've got again, you've got number 4. This is why this has to be a tonal language,
Correct.
because
Yeah.
you've got number 4 looks again, if the decoding is correct, um is the same. It looks like the same word, boo boo, and it's to detest, to abominate, right? And if you look at the hieroglyphs on the left hand side here, the only difference between the hieroglyphs for number 4 and the hieroglyphs for number 2 is the fish and the 3 horizontal lines underneath the fish. Now, that from I'm willing to stake a claim that that's a tonal signification, the fish and the 3 lines, because it's the same word, boo boo, except it must be pronounced in a different way. It must be sounded out in a different way. And again, in Yoruba, boo, it's the same. What does that word mean, Tommy, in Yoruba?
Yeah, it's just mean abuse, to curse someone.
Yeah. Um. To abuse you. And
Yeah,
again,
it's Kabwo.
right.
What language is that?
Madumba in West Cameroon, it's Kabwo.
Wow.
Same thing.
Wow. Wow. Right. Okay. We'll just go on because there's a lot. Then again, we've got number 5, busi or bes, to initiate into something. And in Yoruba, we've got the word busi, to bless, or maybe you could say Oluwa busi, or inkan, or to add to.
To add to,
yeah, to add to something. Again, that strikes me as some kind of an evolution is taking place there, but again, not really, because they look like they still fundamentally have the same meaning there. Okay, we'll move on. This bush sound, number 6, in the Egyptian is secret. And it's a noun, as is denoted there. But in a Yoruba, the word is boshe. I don't know. I think boshe.
Boshe. That sound like to cover something.
Yes, to cover a deed, or to
cover. Yeah, boshe, like to cover a deed. Cover an act.
And you have it again there in the Egyptian lexicon. You've also then got let's just skip a little bit here down to this word BDT. The Coptic has been transliterated to bote or boti, barley. Now
I'm not sure
it
about
says,
this
I don't know what you guys make of this, but it says boti here. Now
like
I couldn't
corn.
Right, malt of Guinea corn.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the word in my head that he's referring to here in Yoruba, but I do know that our word for alcohol. Thank you, Azion Romana. It'd be interesting to know where you're from, Azion Romana. Oti is alcohol in Yoruba.
That's a really good connection. I didn't think about that one. Oti is an alcohol. That's a really good one, actually. You think about it.
Yeah. So I don't know why it's lost. Here he's saying botti is a malt of Guinea corn. So again, that's a word that I've not come across. Thank you, Azion Romana. If you care to share, you can just let us know what your background is. Because Azion was quick to that. Okay, so we go on to this next bit. The consonant //b/ is regular in initial position and introduces the same elements. In hieroglyphic script, the foot is a unilateral phonogram with sound value B. Is a phonogram just what's that? Just fancy for like an alphabet, or
it's a sign that relates to a phonological sound.
Right, and that foot then is the B sound, is the
Is
B sound.
the B sound, yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. So 3.2 says lexical correspondences by labial nasal initial. So the word but, the conjunction, the conjunctive, the conjunction but is m, is the m sound, and or is centered on that m sound. And he says here ama. Now it's not
Ama.
ama, it's amo. Tommy, do you know what I'm talking about? You
Yeah,
could
I'm
say
more. Yeah. So I'm more. So I totally agree with you. The only thing when we pronounce this Egyptian, I think we need to have the appreciation that we're seeing the m sound or letter, as it were, in the Latin letter, but we don't actually have an appreciation of what the vowel the ancient Egyptian might have been using with that, right? So it might have been an o or a that comes with that. We don't know. So there's something lost there, but we got a consonant that we relate it to, and then obviously we know the vowels that we use for that language, and then we can sort of see where the similarities are.
there's two words for but there's two main words for but, the conjunction but that is popularly used. And it's Shubon is what's popularly used more now, but there's Amo.
Amo.
And when I
That's
watch
right, Amo.
when I watch like if you go on Netflix, Nollywood's doing a lot of good content on Netflix right now, going to like traditional Yoruba storytelling and whatnot. And when they produce these movies on Netflix, they're really consulting some real Yoruba linguists, because they're using old-fashioned, when they make historical dramas for Netflix, they're using old-fashioned Yoruba, and the old-fashioned Yoruba for but is more aptly this M, centered around this M sound, amo, that you see here that is talking about. This tonality thing, I think is actually undersold, is underappreciated, and it actually carries over. I just wanted to pause here and say that it carries over to African Americans. Actually, a lot of Americans, black folks in the diaspora on the western side of the Atlantic, have this even in the way they use the English language. Like I was watching a video by a white YouTuber and he was talking very usefully about how advanced African American slang actually is compared to day-to-day English, and something that's been looked down upon a lot in the context of that culture is African American English. It's supposed to be lesser than proper English, but he looked at it and he was explaining how there's a lot of things that an outsider doesn't get listening to African Americans speak, but the African Americans speaking completely more aptly within their context makes more sense to speak that way. And one of the things I caught on to that I don't even think the YouTuber himself appreciated was tonality. And I think you African Americans, some people prefer Black Americans, I use Black Americans, whatever, but you Black Americans, I don't know, Kamji, you might want to talk about this, but you do this a lot where you can say the same thing but in a different tone, and like in like 10 different tones, and they mean like 10 different things. I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like different ways to say finna, like I'm fixing to go to, stuff like that. Or be, the habitual be. Yeah. And different regions have like different ways of articulating it. So yeah, that's real. That's definitely real, right? I would say that it's a scholar from UC Davis Smash Rockwell, he did a presentation of it where he used Ebonics or African American vernacular English to explain the grammar of Metrem and Kimi, or the ancient Kemetic language. And using standard American English, the ancient Egyptian grammar is unintelligible. But using Ebonics or African American vernacular English, it made perfect sense, perfectly aligned. So it's just showing you, you know, where the ancient people actually came from.
Okay, right. I'm gonna move on. So we got the word here for water is centered on me. As you can see there, waters me. He cites Erkundin 46169. I don't know what that is as an authority there. But again, you've got me, more specifically the me or mu sound for water. In the Yoruba, we have omi for water. And make it make sense. That is as basic as it gets. Make it make sense. How on the same continent you have this similarity at such a basic genetic level, but the two aren't related and the two never met each other. I can't see it. I can't unsee it. Then you've got here you've got ma, to see, to look, and in the Yoruba it's mo. To know something or to be aware of something. In the Umbonchi, what's Umbonchi, Kamji?
It's a language that they classify as so-called Bantu in part of the Republic of the Congo, next to the DRC. It's one of those languages, Central Africa.
Right. And he's saying that more apropos, ma is to be awake in that language. And again, you can see the evolution there, the linguistic evolution, very, very like from like to we even talk about it now. We say, "Oh, I'm woke," you know,
Yeah.
like to be woke is to see, like.
And they stole that term, but that's from an African essence.
Do you elaborate?
Yeah, because in the similar thing, like when you see aware, to be aware of something, to be conscious of something, or if you talk about the third eye or first eye, it's cognate with to see, just basic seeing. And like within the Black American society, you know, even going back to like the Jim Crow era, woke was used as a way of like understanding racism, understanding the so-called Black codes, being able to navigate throughout the society. And this has been used in Black culture for decades. And, you know, white liberals actually took the term and borrowed it. And then white conservatives bastardized it to now like woke means anything that's trans. So
Yeah,
they basically bastardized what we intended to fight white supremacy and then use it for their own purposes.
right. And you know what? This this is digressing slightly. So chime in on this. I get really annoyed by this. I started using the word woke in that same sense right at the period when it was being bastardized, and it's caused me no there's no end to the ire it's caused me that people now are using that word to mean something that just doesn't mean at all. And this is my frustration. This happens quite a lot, is that you got people who are using something, they're taking something they don't quite understand and they want to be kind of in on it. But because they're not in on it and they don't understand it, inevitably they bastardize it. And I think that's what happens a lot with well, quite it's inevitable because Black Americans live in close proximity with their white equivalents, and a lot of the time the contributions that Black American society made and has made, is making and will make to that society is not appreciated. So when it's not appreciated, if you don't appreciate something for what it's doing to enrich your culture, quite often when you want to consciously use it, you bastardize it, if that makes sense. There's a
Yeah.
lot of that. Like I'll give this example. Like I when the new GTA game came out, it's not out yet, but when, I don't know if you guys have seen that trailer for the new GTA game, and it showed, you know, a load of craziness, like twerking, like so people acting fools, it showed some rednecks, but it also showed Black Americans in, I think, what's meant to be California, um just twerking on top of cars, people with gold in their teeth, the sort of very reductionist, stereotypical Black, what outsiders look on as Black American culture. Now, there was no end to the response from the sort of right-wing YouTube, saying, just taking snippets from this one, you never mind the redneck culture that was exhibited in the trailer. You know, they took these snippets and they were like, this, this is what multiculturalism, this is what it's brought us and everything. And it was just very ironic, because I was thinking to myself, well, so are we just going to miss out like the hundreds and hundreds of years of, like, let's say you're looking on all that stuff as negative, right? Which it is, like, I don't know, it's just foolishness, twerking on top of vehicles and whatnot. But are we just gonna pretend like Elvis didn't just steal a whole Black music genre? Are we just gonna pretend that white kids do not do, like, white American kids don't have any affiliation with classical music or anything like that? They're just all into, like, basically hip hop culture or some repackaged form of it. Are we just gonna pretend like jazz and all the other things, like that African American culture, basically American culture is African American culture, if you're honest. Popular American culture is Black American culture. But
Yeah,
you
that's a
had
whole
people,
different live. That's
yeah, but you had people just chomping at the bit to say, well, look, see, this is what we've been saying. But it's like, anyway, that's a massive digression, and it was a pet peeve of mine, and it goes to this word woke. And as you were saying, it goes to a sort of an African concept to see something properly. And you have that here all the way back in the ancient Egyptian language, with the word ma, to see, look, and again you have that corresponding in Yoruba, which is mo, lati mon, to be aware, right? Okay, so we've got another word, this word here down number 5, mi, mu, more. It says imperative Coptic, more, ma, and it says id at the end there, and it's to take. And again, you go to Yoruba, and that's mu, munko is to take something, and umbochi, that Congolese language that you were talking about, again, almost identical. Again, ma, to take, imperative.
And it's interesting to mention, when we're talking about sort of the DRC, I mean, if you think about where the Yoruba sort of geography ends, sort of the Atlantic, that sort of trigger point of Africa, but DRC is like you're still going further down south into the really in the heart of Africa itself, that continent. So it just shows you how far down south that language traveled, which is quite, just showing you how far that migration has happened, to give people a sense of the widespreadness of that language. It's quite interesting.
And I constantly, sorry, Cam, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would say that to buttress that point, the pre-dialectical ancestor from my research most likely came from the eastern part of the Green Sahara, and then after the African human period just precipitated across the continent. So it's like when you see that, because a lot of people in the studies, you may find some similarities with Yoruba, Igbo, and they say, oh, the ancient Kemites were Igbos, or oh, the ancient Kemites were Yoruba. But the more accurate thing to say is that they're from the same ancestor, and the descendants of that ancestor spread across the continent, similar to how Indo-European came from the Kurgan steppes of Ukraine, and it's as far as from Britain to northern India, you find Indo-European languages.
Yeah, correct.
We're in the section that's talking about the lexical correspondences by nasal alveolar, N initial, and by approximate labial, W initial. And I'm going to skip a few here, and just so we can get to a more juicier parts of this this article.
Three is a good one though. That three right there, just because of the and I'm pronouncing his Tomi pronounced his name right, but Oranmion. Like his pillar, Dr. Salau out of Tuskegee University in Alabama connected the architectonics of that pillar in Ile-Ife to the Tekens of ancient Kemet, or the so-called obelisks. So it's very fascinating that the city of the pillar, Iunu, is cognate or putatively cognate with Owan, or pillar in Yoruba. I thought that was interesting.
I've never heard this before. Wow. So can you break that down to me? Well, just based on what I've just said, I've never heard it before. So what's the EUU?
The Iunu, the city of the pillar, that's basically or on in many in the Greek literature or biblical literature, that was one of the major cities of the ancient Kemetic theology that they used. If I'm not mistaken, it was the Ogdoad who came from Heliopolis or Iunu, and its transcription is the city of the pillars. And you had a lot of ancient Tekens that you can also find today among the Aksumite culture of Ethiopia. And for the Yoruba people, according to this, cognate like Owan would be how they called pillar. So that actually lends to support Dr. Abdulrazak Salau, who is a professor at Tuskegee University in Alabama, who is also a fluent speaker of Yoruba and Hausa. And he had a dissertation called The Egyptian Origin of the Yoruba, where he compared a lot of the linguistic elements and relations of both, as well as some of the architectural similarities. And there's a pillar, I'm sure you've seen it, in Ile-Ife, like a pillar that was put by Oranmion there, and he compared the architecture of that pillar as rooted in like a classical African tradition of the Tekens or obelisks of ancient Kemet. So it kind of goes full circle. It went full circle for me to see that correspondence here at number 3.
Wow. If you can, if you get a spare minute, could you type that into the chat for the folks, or could someone in the chat find out about that, because I've never come across that academic before. That sounds amazingly interesting.
Yeah, I can send like, let me see if I can share my screen and maybe quickly show you Yoruba.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Ancient Georgian Yoruba. This is his dissertation right here. Window. Yeah, there's a lot here. That's a lot. Hold on a sec. Boom, boom. I should have it. Yeah, it should let me just let me know if you can see this. Boom, boom, boom. StreamYard Studio. Chrome tab. There, right there. Gotcha. Cool. So you should be able to see that in the background.
All right, I'm gonna add it to the stage. Right. Okay.
So this is the dissertation by Abdulrazak Salau from Temple University, his graduate dissertation, and he basically goes on the theories of the origins of the Yoruba people.
Wow.
And, see if I could scroll over to the obelisk right here, the Opa Orion, and that's going to be page 164 right
Wow.
here. And then he says that there's a relevant archaeological discovery has yielded some definitely demonstrated inherent connections between the ancient Egyptian and Yoruba people. An example of this demonstration can be seen in the image of the ancient Egyptian obelisk, which was replicated in Ile-Ife. And then another very important discovery relating to the Yoruba and the ancient Egyptian cultures are the discovery of original pharaonic ram-headed breastplates found in Apapa, Lagos. And Dr. Sandro Capocicci has discussed that as well. Let me see if I can scroll down a little bit faster. Oh, it's not going to let me. It's not going to let me preview this. I might have to download it first. See if I can download and open it up.
Definitely, you don't share anything private.
Oh yeah, I'm trying not to do that. I don't think they could see anything. Really.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, this is like my personal. Yeah, is it not working?
Yeah,
there it is.
Well, I'm gonna thank you for sharing. Now I'm gonna look. Okay.
Well, can you see this?
That. Yeah,
we can continue if you want to.
Yeah, I'm gonna read that in my own time. That's a heavyweight document right there. That's amazing. Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. So, wow, I mean, I'm just late to the party. That's one thing I'm realizing. I'm just late to the party because people have been on this since forever. Like I said at the beginning, my first sort of opening into this was through Tommy. And back when he was telling me about this, I wasn't interested at all. I didn't think there was a legitimate grounds for linking the two things. But shout out to all these forerunners, man, including yourself and Tommy, who's over us in the live. We got thank you, Soul Poster. Soul Poster's posting some gems in the comments there. And Justice Truth says, you're breaking it down. Thank you. I'm learning so much.
Yeah, this is what it looks like, I think.
Okay.
You've probably seen it before, like the Ile-Ife obelisk.
Yeah, that's
right. Yes, I have. I was trying to think of what you're talking about. I have seen
Oromiyan, yeah. So the legend goes that was actually Oromiyan's staff. And it's I mean, if that's a staff, and that thing's over 8 feet tall, probably close to 9 feet tall. If that's a staff, then it indicates that it was a giant of a human being. Obviously, that's what that's indicating.
Might be dealing with Nephilim.
Some Nephilims.
Yorubas, you guys heard it here first. Yorubas were seeded by the Anunnaki, man.
Yeah. So that's the legend goes that was his staff. But again, it could have been like Kamjiverse say, it could have been an obelisk.
Yeah. Okay. Right, yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen.
Yeah, for sure. We could continue going
again. Yeah, thanks, brother. Let me just quickly do this. Cool. Right. Okay, so now we're down to this word iwa, wa, or iwa. Again, the consonant there is focused on the w sound, and the Yoruba equivalent is wa. Just a very basic sound there. Wa, come. It just means come, and then it perfectly for me correlates with the Egyptian there, wa, or iwa. Then we've got the again, you've got this. This is a tonal language. This is a tonal language because you've got almost almost identical sound for to exist in the Egyptian there, and it's uwa, but in the hieroglyph, instead of the two human legs preceding the bird, you've got this feather. Maybe I think that's ostrich. That's an ostrich feather, and you've got this feather preceding the bird, and that can only indicate that the tone changes because it's essentially the same thing. So you've got iwa, and again in Yoruba, the word for the word to be is what, Tommy?
To be wa.
Yeah.
Muwa.
Wa.
I wa. I am
That,
muwa.
and that's different to wa,
Wa. Wa.
which is to come.
Yeah. Wa. Muwa. Wa.
Yeah. Wa
Different sounds. And the
sounds like you're
same
about to.
spelling.
Yeah. Wa sounds like you're about to break into song. Wa just sounds like how you might say it with an English just level tone. Wa, and that means to be. Like this, that in itself. I'm seeing Mr. Black Gold saying wow, and that is literally no pun intended there, but that is literally what is going through my mind right now as I see this. You got in the Egyptian again that almost the same word but meaning come, and you've got the same sounding word in Yoruba meaning come. Also, this just changed a little bit in tonality, meaning, and it means to be. And the same thing happens, cross it over in the ancient Egyptian tongue.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, I would say that I think the more we've had this conversation, the more I am so sure that ancient Egyptian language has to be tonal. Has to be tonal. Yeah.
Yeah, if we could
It's
find
the only thing that makes sense when you look at the hieroglyphs and you see similar diagrams, but kind of similar sort of consonants, but then you've got to have different sounds for that to make sense.
No, I agree. I mean, I think when I was looking at this, I didn't necessarily go into that direction, but I was thinking to myself, there's a lot of homonyms in this language. There's a lot of words that look like they sound exactly the same, but they have different meanings. But it being tonal, even though most Western scholars claim that it's not, I would just be interested to know like how many Africans have looked at the vocalization of it and what conclusions that they've come to, because from my experience, the Western scholars are usually lying or they're usually hiding something. So like the discovery of inherent tonality would be extremely helpful with understanding the ancient language.
And I think one of the things the Western scholars tend to suffer from is, we talked about it before, Victor, is uh, sort of stuck in their own prism, their own worldview, or the actual just the boundaries that they're grown up in. So they might look at Egyptian language and then really think it's kind of like Greek, for example, in terms of Greek's not tonal, right? So they look at those civilizations and it's not necessarily tonal language. So they could easily just because of they want to do this, assume it's like those other languages, and say that's not like the quote unquote primitive languages down further down south. Whereas actually, maybe that does explain how certain Egyptian words, which appear similar, actually are pronounced, or there's different emphasis on the parts of different parts of before after the consonants, because it's a tonal language, and that makes a lot of sense. Actually, it makes a lot of sense.
It's the only thing that makes sense. And again, this goes back to the point I was trying to make at the beginning, is that it's a discipline, at least as practiced by Western academics. It's a discipline that cuts its nose off to spite its face by not looking to wider Africa, because you can't fully understand all of these things that you purport to spend day and night trying to understand in these stuffy and dusty university halls. You can't possibly understand it if you don't look to wider Africa. You just can't. And I want to share something. You mentioned the Greek there. If Kamji has something to say just before I do that, feel free to go ahead. But I'm gonna. Oh, actually, first let me just say thank you, Mr. Black Gold. £5 super chat says Western scholars, linguists are done. They have no role in translating this language. Africans must lead this charge. Must. Yeah, exactly. Let me just share this with you guys. This is an article I ran into. It's on. I saved it. I just took a screenshot of the relevant bit, and it's called the Comprehensive Egyptian Tonal Musical Writing System. And if you just type those words into Google, you'll come across the article yourself. It's a longer article, but it was looking at how the Egyptian music influenced the Greeks. Now, I did a live ages and ages ago now, months back, in which we looked at this debate between these two scholars and the great I always forget his name. I can't remember his name again. Destroying Black Civilization.
Chancellor Williams.
Chancellor Williams, thank you. Was it Chancellor Williams or it wasn't Chancellor Williams, but he okay, doesn't matter. It wasn't Chancellor Williams, but I think he wrote a sort of introduction to the book. But and there was this debate going on about how much the ancient Egyptians actually influenced the Greeks. Now, these two Western academics were on the side of it's been overblown by Afrocentrists, and they didn't influence the Greeks at all. Except this was in the 90s, this debate happened, early 90s. Now, the two were adamant, absolutely adamant, that, Egyptian had nothing to do with the Greeks, and, it's all Afrocentric nonsense. But the truth keeps coming out. I just highlighted this from this article. It says, and this is just a by-the-by point, Francois Joseph Fétis, an accomplished musicologist, discovered the roots of the Greeks' notation symbols to be the demotic form of the ancient Egyptian writing. F.J. Fétis states in his biography Universelle, blah, 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 1837, he says, I have not the least doubt that this musical notation used in ecclesiastical music by modern Greeks belonged to ancient Egypt. I have in support of my opinion the resemblance borne by the signs in this notation, erroneously attributed to St. John of Damascus, to those of the demotic or popular characters of the ancient Egyptians. Now, I am in no doubt that the reason why those two Western academics were in denial about the influence of the ancient Egyptians on the Greeks was because the whole debate was based on the premise that the ancient Egyptians were Black Africans. Now, if it wasn't based on that premise, then they might have, been a bit more honest. But because it was based on the premise, the assumption, it was before a Black sort of student body audience. So the premise was that they were Black Africans. It was no, the Greeks had nothing to do with the Egyptians. It's all been overblown. But here you have another Western studier of all of this saying down to the music, down to the notation of their music, the Greeks took that from the Egyptians as well. I just thought that was interesting. I'm just going to leave that there. That's what I'm going to say about that. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
Anyway.
We could do another live about that, because even chironomy, or the act of like directing music, can be found in ancient Kemet before it is seen in Europe.
Incredible. I didn't know that, but yeah, incredible. So we have we talk about this already, ku, to die, and that word there again is seen in the ancient Egyptian language, ku or ku, death, and you've got it here again in Yoruba, ku. It says in the Akon, which is I think Ghanaian, wu, to die. So that loses the k sound, but it maintains the wu the sound, and that is death in the Akon language.
You see a lot of this language as the Mbochi had, Yoruba and the Mbochi seem to have a lot of similarities.
Yeah, not to correct you, it didn't actually lose the velar, but he's saying it's cognate with mummy case or we there.
Say that again.
Like it didn't lose the velar or the K sound.
Right.
More so, it was cognate with we, or the mummy case, that we at the bottom of that.
Right. And okay, cognate
So the,
meaning.
okay, the mummy case, the covering of the mummy, the
Oh,
encasement
I
is
see. I see.
actually comparable to the
Right.
Akan sound
Right.
of
Right.
Wu.
Right.
Okay, that's
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
Wow, right. I got a super chat to read out here. Thank you so much, Sky King. He says, Black Athena Martin. Thank you. The debate was between Dr. John Henrik Clark, uh, uh, and they were against whatever the other two were, but it was Dr. John Henrik Clark on the sane side of the debate. Sky King says with a £5 super chat, Black Athena Martin Bernal. The book is right next to me. There was a debate with Dr. John Henrik Clark Martin on YouTube and two other in opposition. Yes, that's correct. Thank you so much for that, Sky King. Okay, so we go back to this document we've got here. What is very interesting, says Obenga, is the fact that the Mbonchi language in Central Africa shows two forms, wa and iku, leku, respectively, for the verbal form and the substantive or nominal form. Yoruba has ku and iku, and Akan, wu, and owu exclusively. Possibly the common Bantu must have two forms, ku to die, death, and wu, wa, to die. The negative impersonal in Egyptian language is do not, with this script variation. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mashing. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't.
So can you explain that? That's where this is going. But can you explain it to the chat?
Yeah. So ma is literally means do not. So that definitely chimes there.
And that's
And again,
exactly the same word in the Egyptian, again centered on that ow, that m sound. And all you've got, again signifying a tonal language, all you've got after the owl is this horizontal hand stretched out, two hands, to indicate a different inflection, possibly on the vowel that follows the M sound there. And again, you have in the Yoruba, the word for don't do something or restrain is ma. Simple. In Akan is ma. I think there. Possibly the Egyptian M was vocalized. Ma, do not. Modern African languages are the only languages in the world to help the vocalization of ancient Egyptian pharaonic language. Of course, the contribution of Coptic to this thorny question of the vocalization of ancient Egyptian remains crucial. And of course, I did a video a long time ago now that spoke about how the original Copts were, well, as could only have been, a very black-skinned people. And when the Copts, as we would think of them, much lighter skinned today, this was going to an ancient Arabic text that was describing the black groups in Egypt, and it classified the Copts alongside the Ethiopians as the blacks of Egypt.
Yeah, that was a really good video.
Oh, thank you, Kamji. You remember, thank you. So yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me that the Coptic too is crucial here. Okay, experts give Proto-Bantu again B, bad, and Common Bantu B, bad. Yoruba is Ibi, evil, and Akan, Boni, bad. Nobody has ever explained, I think he means to write there, the N sound of Akan Boni and other Atlantic African languages. To clearly perceive the problem, it is necessary to request Egyptian facts. You said something about this in the last live. You said, Kamji, you said something about, you were explaining to me about that burst sound, that consonant sound, and you used a specific jargon to describe what was going on there. I think Vela or something. I forget.
It's this nasal. This is what Obenga talks about, and this point right there is like super important, where he says to avoid using Proto-Bantu because it is a hypothetical reconstruction, or Common Bantu because there are certain facts Like there are certain phonetic facts, morphological facts that it won't be able to uncover with respect to the evolution of African languages. And the bad is a perfect example of that, because Obenga says this like ad nauseum throughout his literature. Ancient Egyptian, what you have there is a reconstruction with Coptic. So it's a hypothetical reconstruction with respect to what we know about its descendants. And then Proto-Bantu is a reconstruction based upon, Greenberg's mass comparison of the modern Central and Southern African languages. So it's almost impossible to get a linguistic fact if you're comparing a hypothesis with a hypothesis. It's better to use a modern African language, look at the attestations in the ancient Egyptian language with respect to the Coptic evolution to get an accurate fact about what actually happened.
Brilliant. I hear what you say. I hear exactly what you're saying now. But you would think that would be, I mean,
common sense.
You would think, yeah, exactly.
It's racism. I mean, literally, that's the only explanation.
Like, yeah, well, that's what I wanted you to say.
That's the only explanation, because why would you not? They say that they came from the South. They say that their ancestors are from Inner Africa. Why would you not use the languages of Inner Africa to uncover the facts about the ancient Kemetic language?
Yeah,
Shout
out to someone who said earlier, though, we've got to balance this out. There are a lot of white, quote unquote, white, black, it's all silly classifications anyway, but there are a lot of white academics who have been saying this now too for a while. Christopher Eric, sorry,
Satzinger is one of them. I'm a fan of Eric. Satzinger is a German, and Satzinger actually related like Zulu and Swahili and some Kikongo languages on typological grounds, but he related them to the ancient Kemetic language, and he said, yeah, these are probably related. Eric, the reason why I don't like Eric, or I'm not as much of a fan, Eric's okay in some things, but at the Barcelona conference in 1996, Obenga confronted him, and he's like, hey, Afroasiatic is not legit. Like, you can't prove that Semitic is related to the ancient Kemetic language. And Eric admitted that, yeah, we haven't had proof of it. But then he continues. And like when he relates the ancient Egyptian language or Kemetic language, he's going to stick into the boundaries of Afroasiatic, and he's going to stick into like Hausa because it's comfortable. But the moment that you bring in Yoruba and, Mbochi and other Inter-African languages that defy Greenberg's boundaries, that's when academia starts to collapse, because it's like, not only is the ancient Kemet related to black people, but it's related to these Negroes, like these Nigerian Negroes, and they don't want to admit that. They would rather say Somali, these Ethiopians, but they don't want to give it to the Negroes.
Yeah. And that's obviously, that's clear why. But okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that about Eric, but I mean, he does do better work elsewhere, and
of course.
So for that I give him props. But this Satzinger fellow, I'll have to look into him because he sounds more promising. I've not heard of
I can send you that, like Satzinger, Saussure. There's a few other Europeans who have been honest. Karen Excel.
Yeah, and that's important because again, we do have allies in this. We do have not even just allies, we have just honest, decent human beings, whatever
who can look at the facts and be like, yeah, they can look at the stuff on the screen and be like, this is related. There's no denying it.
Yeah, exactly. So we have on the screen, let's have a look at this. Okay, I want to quickly go to, because I want us to finish this quite soon. And then I want to ask Kamji something towards the end. But go on. Sorry, what was that?
I was going to tie this with when years ago when I drew your attention to there's two things that made me think that's very interesting. So we all know Ra is the sun god, right? The famous sun god of the ancient Egyptian people. And then for there's a connection in here where your cursor's on three, to rise, right? And I thought, and then but there's also a connection to ara, which is like lightning, right? In our language. And then the other thing was we talked about, if you previously we talked about, I think it's eb, right? Eb being like bad or evil in our language, eb. That's quite close to Anubis, like Anubis. And I was just thinking it's quite interesting that those very, very prominent characters in the Egyptian mythology is actually quite um, parallel to words for light, and lightning, and in case Eb, darkness, or Eb's evil, darkness. And just quite interesting those parallels exist in ancient Egyptian and also in our language, in the Yoruba language.
Now, thank you for pointing us to that, because I think we should just go straight there, and then we'll digress onto other bits in this section. The Egyptian word for sun is, I'll just move this out of the way so people can see that. The Egyptian word for sun is ra, sun, day, time. Okay, all right. So you just heard what Brother Tommy said there. Okay, now the word that Obenga focuses on here is ru, to rise or to come up from the ground, to spring up. In called rulatile. So you have that, but I thought he missed the trick here. Not missed the trick, but he wanted to focus more on that. But this word ra itself, just basically taken just straight from the Egyptian, like Tommy was saying there, you've got ara, which is lightning, okay, but you've also got our word for the sun, just the sun, which itself is centered on that r consonant sound, okay, and the word is simply orun, okay, and that word again just changed the tonality on the o and the u sound, and you've got heaven, orun, okay, and orun and orun, okay, and you've got that here with you've got the Egyptian sound centering on the ra sound. But
That's
again,
so
I started
true.
to think, how else can you stretch this out? You've also got, and this isn't actually that far removed. You've also got the fact that their god for the heavens, okay, was, I've got here in the note, if you guys can see that. What have I got written down? Forgivably of Benga misses a trick. The Yoruba word for sun is orun, and orun as in heaven. See Horus, who was the sun, sky, and heaven deity. I don't know if you guys see the link there. The god, the Egyptian god for the sun and the heavens was Horus, or Horus.
Horus.
Our
Yeah.
word for the heavens and the sun is orun. Like, I can't not see that.
So true.
Let's move on. Let's go on to let's just quickly look at I. The word number one there, I, is iri. The T is not part of the radical. Let's have a look and see if Kamji's still around. Kamji, can you explain what he's saying there when he says the T is not part of the radical? Do you haven't
so the T is basically not part of the core of the word, in the sense that, like, when you're comparing the cognates, you want to strictly deal with, what's called the radical or along the morpheme boundary, because you're going to have other, like, affixes, whether it's a suffix or a prefix to denote something, whether it's gender categorization, whether it's tense, aspect, etc., etc. So, like, in the comparison, he's only going to deal with the I, the initial vowel, and that R, that's the initial consonant in his comparison.
Right. So the T is something like it only makes it makes the word a derivative. Okay, cool. So, and then you see in the Yoruba, iri, to see with your eyes. That's the word we've got. Tommy, can you confirm that?
Yeah. Re,
Yeah,
Muri. I see. Yeah, you read to see. Yeah.
that to me. That's incredible. And we're gonna get to a part where I keep saying this stuff's incredible. I think Obenga puts it very well. We're coming up to it very soon as to why it's quite amazing. You've got this word, this rua or rua, to consider doing something. The Yoruba here is ro,
Rule.
to ro nkan, to
Rule.
onu. Sorry, go
Mm.
on. Say that.
Yeah. Rule. Think about it. Rule.
To
Rule.
conceive, to imagine. We've lost the w sound that I think Kamji calls it the vela or the trill. That trill, I think it's a trill sound. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we still have that R sound. It's not too dissimilar.
Are you talking about the the W sound? And
Yeah, the
Yeah,
W
the
sound.
W sound.
yeah, that would be the labiovelar approximate.
Right. I've got to say again, I've got to point out, Bro Kamji, your background is engineering. Tommy's background isn't too dissimilar, is chemical engineering. But
Nice.
again, this is like this is going full circle because Egyptology as a study started from like
Civil
uh
engineers.
yeah, people like dilettantes, but very knowledgeable dilettantes
Yeah.
with and again, it couldn't not have started from there because to go into this stuff, people are trying to survive. But
Mhm.
who has time to study this unless you've got a bit of leisure time? Who has time to look back into history unless you've got a bit of leisure time? And that's
Mm.
important. This was why it was the purview of aristocrats. So we could
Mm.
possibly, I say this to preempt somebody who might come later in the comments and say, what do you guys know? You're not experts, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but this started from people who weren't experts in nothing either. So
Good point. Very good
just
point.
please miss us with that rubbish. So can you just, it's amazing to me the amount of knowledge you've got on this. Can you just quickly just recap what your background is and how you came to just knowing all of this just technical stuff?
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I'm in engineering, particularly like structural systems analysis, infrastructure, building bridges. It's my area of expertise. But similar to Tommy, I actually have a like dynastic lineage, in the sense of like descending from a long line of royals in Western Cameroon. So like a lot of this stuff has been conserved from our history in terms of like discussing our descent from ancient Kemet and the Pharaonic civilization, but also being, storehouses of knowledge and wisdom. So like the Bamum language and the Madumba language, being very sacred in our culture, especially in light of like French imperialism, wanting to
Mm.
conserve that and just wanting to like share the message of unity and Pan-Africanism, and Black power and Black love and Black solidarity. That's what really influences me, even beyond my own field, from dealing with the pyramids and the obelisks and just the different African and African centered fractal based infrastructural traditions, trying to conserve that and modernize that for the 21st century, as well as just be able to discover like the different aspects of civilization that we lost. So all of that drives me in my work to just continuously research and bring this stuff out, and then help others who want to, learn along the way.
Thank you.
That's really
Thank you
good.
for that. Yeah.
It's really good.
And yourself, Tommy, what kind
Sorry, is
of,
it?
yeah, just what's your background and how did you end up like just doing like looking into this stuff?
Hey, yeah. My background is in chemical engineering. Worked in oil and gas engineering. Now I work in nuclear industry. My background, I think kind of similar to Kamji, is um, when you learn about your history, you want to know a bit more. The people who came before you, what what motivated them, and you find that not much has been preserved in way of writing, but there's just a hunger to learn. I mean, in my own part, I just want to understand, and I've got kids now, and I also want to translate that information to them, and I find that the most effective way of keeping people in touch with culture, going back, and you can keep them in touch with culture of your ancestors going all the way back, is through language. It's the most effective way. And so for me, understanding the language, understanding the roots of the language is very interesting, very important, very powerful. And then that also gives you a sense of self, a sense of where you are, where your ancestors come from, and then start connecting to that heritage. So for me, that's sort of where my interest came from, understanding my people, understanding the language, and then I can sort of trace back where they come from using that. I think it's quite powerful.
Amen, amen. So, Factan, thank you for your super chat, $5. The knowledge you guys provide is priceless. Well, you know, I feel like that. I feel like that listening to Tommy and Kamji tonight. Azion Romana says, he says, would love if you guys could look into Yoruba Paleo Hebrew lang connection. Sorry, I've kind of butchered that. Azion Romana says, would love if you guys could look into Yoruba Paleo Hebrew lang connection. Good channel. And then he links the channel. That's £5 from Azion Romana. Thank you so much for that. Much love to you.
I can speak to that quickly, very quickly.
Sure. Yeah.
Like any connection between what we may call Paleo-African, this article calls Egypto-African, and Semitic would be by the way of borrowing. So like any relationship, like the same relationship that you can find between Paleo Hebrew and Yoruba, you would be able to find between Semitic and the ancient Kemetic language. But that's not from like a common ancestor. That's from borrowing.
Right. That's later on.
Yeah. And I've looked at this a lot, very extensively, and I'm like definitively, sure that Semitic is not related. Even Amharic in Ethiopia has a lot of borrowing from the so-called Cushitic languages. But at the core of their vocabulary, it is not related to.
I think they added the Asiatic strategically. I think it's kind of like when you're arguing with your missus, and let's say anyone ever been in a relationship, you know this, right? You are 110% right. You're on the right side, but you know how women be. You gotta give them something. You gotta give them something. You can't just you can't just let the argument end on, look, I'm right, bow. Bow now, kiss the ring, and just let's have it. Don't you gotta give them? Oh well, I could have been a bit more understanding. You gotta do a bit of caressing there. That's what we're dealing with with the Afroasiatic thing. It's like they know they're wrong. They know this is a purely Afro. There's no Asiatic to it, but out of ego, they've just stuck on the Asiatic. They're just stuck on it, and Obenga kind of talks about this. He's gonna talk to this as we close out this document. It is almost impossible for a language to borrow from another language basic words such as eye, mouth. I hope my missus isn't listening. Actually, I hope she didn't catch that bit. That's a tactic I don't want to reveal it. That's one for the boys, right?
I didn't mean that.
I'll be editing that bit out. When the thing's done. It is almost possible for a language to borrow from another language basic words such as eye, mouth, sun, because they obviously belong to the basic vocabulary filter of any language in the world. Again, that we said this earlier. So these similarities at this basic level, and again, it goes back to what you just said, they're not borrowed later. We're talking about words to do with the sun, heaven, eye, mouth, very basic things, okay? And these lexical items help in addition to reconstruct the pre-dialect or common origin as follows. And then he does this diagram where he talks about Iri, Egypto-African common stock, ancient Egyptian Erit, Iri, Yoruba, and C, DC, Misi, Liso, Mbochi, Bantu. Then he talks about the Ra, mouth, meaning mouth, Egypto-African common stock, ancient Egyptian Coptic, Ra, Ro, Lo, corresponding with the Yoruba word to speak. This is Ro, or Oro.
Oro.
Right. Which it just means words. The Bantu there is Noor, or No. Okay, you've got the sound change. He says the sound change is usual. R, L, N. Right. So he's given the sort of evolution there of how the consonant has turned from R to L to N, and exhibiting itself in the Bantu tongue there. Then he talks about Ra, son, Egypto-African common stock, Ra, Re, Re, Le, Ru, Ri, or Esse. Let's go down. By the way, I think what he's saying about the sound change is akin to how you can have Europeans who like will say yeah, but like if you go up further, that is a ja sound. Like, sorry, down further south, that's a ja sound. We go further up east in Europe, it's a yeah. The J sound is a yeah sound. I think.
Yeah, and you could even in African American English, like you may hear bro, you may hear bruh, you may hear bra, you may hear bre, according to like the region that you're in.
Precisely. Thank you. Okay, so the sound change RLS is well expected, he says, for sure. There are no Afroasiatic. Right. This is the bit. This is a seminal part. This is what Kamji's been talking about all night here. Obenga says the sound change RLS is well expected. For sure, there are no Afroasiatic cognate lexical items to be put on balance together with the linguistic reconstruction above. The so-called Afroasiatic family is but an ideological and racist position. Calling names there, he's taking names there. He's taking names. He just comes out and he says it. There is no scientific evidence to technically test Afroasiatic hypothesis. Indeed, technically speaking, there is no one single scientific evidence of Afroasiatic family, and linguistic data do not allow or does not allow at all considering Afroasiatic as a linguistic possibility. The facts are plainly clear crystal as follows. And then
he's killing them.
Go on.
I'm just saying he's killing them because for all the chronologists out there, all the skepticoons who think that Egypto-African is invalid and Afroasiatic is valid, you should be able to find cognates in basic lexical items. If you can't, it is not scientific. Afroasiatic is a pseudoscientific linguistic phyla.
It's there because, like, let's get darker now. Okay, forget the analogy I used about the man to the woman earlier. Yeah, it's there because you have to placate a side that wants to play up a foreign influence on something that properly only belongs to Black Africans. Yeah. So they have to introduce that Semitic element, however non-existent it is, and they have to play it up to the point where like we're even discussing it as a thing, but it's not a thing. He does this list. You can add to that, or you can interrupt me, but I'm just going to go on if nobody does. But
I mean that list is pretty powerful. So just looking at that, you just go. You can see which ones are grouped. You can see there's this actual Semitic language, right? And you can see that this is not. There's no relationship there. So how can you then? Yeah, how does one come out of that the other?
It doesn't. It doesn't. That's the thing. It can't. It doesn't. And this has gone on for so long. We're in 2025 now, and it's like, how is it still a thing? How have we not? And for me, it kind of shows how the human ego works, the human mind works. You've got an institution really that's based on ego, that's based on the fact, just pettiness, really, because really, what you're looking at here ends the debate. But I think a lot of people's jobs and a lot of people's prestige depends on carrying this myth on. So they're just gonna keep it going, regardless of the fact that we're supposed to be all grown here. We're supposed to be all adults looking after, just in search for the truth. But human pettiness is such that they're just going to keep doing it. They're just going to keep saying Afroasiatic and whatever. So we've got this list here: Asian, Egyptian, Ra, Semitic equivalents, Akkadian, Ugaritic, Hebrew. Like Kamji was saying earlier, no similarity whatsoever. You got this Egypto-African list on this side, and you can just see Coptic, Sidamo, that's Cushitic, Rendile, Kenyan, Niger, Liberia, Yoruba down to Mbonchi Bantu. It's like it's plain. So where's the Asiatic part? Where is the Asiatic part? Let's go down, and you've got the same when it comes to the Indo-European family. Also stands by itself as follows. He says, Sawel, Sul, Son, Sanskrit, Sura, Surya, Gothic, Sawil, Latin, Sol, Spanish, Sol, French, Soleil, Solaire, English, Son, Solar, German, Son, Lithuanian, Saul, or Sol, etc. But then you got this table down here, and you can see the link with the Egypto-African, Ra, Coptic, Ro, Isekiri, Aru, Yoruba, Ro, or Ro, Bozo, Atlantic, Lo, Pele. It just goes on. Go on to the Semitic. These are fundamental building blocks of a language that proves that languages are related on a basic level. You got Akkadian, Poo. Guys said Poo, you know. You know. It's just so there's so many jokes that can come out of that. Ugaritic, P, Hebrew, Pei, Phoenician, P, Arabic, Fam, Ple, Afam, Fu, Ethiopian, and this is what you were saying as well, Kamji, Gez, Af. Like there's no, where is the link? Where is the link? It'd be interesting.
I can give Eric credit here where he says that there's too much Semeticentrism or Semitic centrism in Afroasiatic. And also, when he said that Semitic could very well have originated in Africa, but it's a separate language family. Even if it did, it's separate. As you can see, you just don't see a relationship between it and African languages whatsoever.
The sound change is usual. Again, Afroasiatic implies that Egyptian Ro, Semitic P, and Berber Imi derive from a common pre-dialectal stock, namely Afroasiatic, which in good linguistics should be the common family. The common origin of the actual languages. Afroasiatic is just a Eurocentric bad lie. Lam gives the sign Lu in Pula, meaning to put in the mouth. This fits well with the sound change RLN. And then there's some more another few lists, and I'm just going to run through them quickly here. And I think it's important that we get this down, because lo and behold, the word for magician or medicine man in the Egyptian centered on the sound so or so or so. I don't know if you've got a better take on that pronunciation, Kamji. Sao, okay, Sao, and hair in the Yoruba, to apply medicine to someone. Now I was confused there, but I think it's how Obenga's put it. He says sa, but it's son. To apply medicine or healing, woyon son. Sorry, go on, Tommy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so you've got son, and then you've also got the word also meaning magician, but then I had to think hard there, because Obenga hasn't got a word equivalent for the magician aspect of this word. But I am thinking of the word now. I don't know if Tommy's thinking of it too. Osho. Osho, which would be a male witch, a warlock,
Wizard. Yeah,
or
yeah,
a
warlock.
wizard.
Yeah, yeah, for
And
sure. That's right. Yeah.
again, we're not a million miles away from this sow sound that Kamjiverse just mentioned. You've got Sa there with the knife, Egyptian, and in Yoruba, the only word I can think of that Obenga's trying to
Sha.
say here is yes. What's that, Tommy?
Sha.
Sha. Yes, Sha.
It's like
Yeah.
It's a cut something called Shanko.
Yeah. To exactly to Shankon. Yeah, I wonder if that's where, like, because there's a lot of black, like, African lingo that's mixed in with the Jamaican group in London, because you know the Caribbeans came first in droves to the
UK.
melting pot that's London in the UK. Then the black Africans came, namely the Nigerians, the Yorubas. I wonder if that's the etymology for shank, like to be like talking about, oh, I shanked, I shanked man up, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
somebody in the
interesting.
chat put Osofo in a con for healer.
Right, what's that word? Osofo.
Osofo.
I didn't know that. That's Akon, is it? That's the Ghanaian.
The con in Ghana.
Okay, and then I'm gonna go down to this word, Sisi Hori in Egyptian. And in Yoruba, the word for now immediately is Nisisinyi. Okay, here Obenga has Isisi, but I think that G is meant to be a Y sound.
In the phonetic transcription of ancient Kemetic, J is often used for Y.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And then the icon is CCG now. That's nearly identical as well. Mbochin Bantu is CC suddenly. Right. But then actually, on that J, excuse me, on that J sound, Tommy, what do you off the top of your head, can you think of the word for suddenly in Yoruba?
Suddenly.
Kinkoshele
Lojiji.
Right. Lojiji, right?
Yeah.
That's the word for like suddenly. So that corresponds as well. It'd be interesting to know the Bantu speakers say pronounce the shishi. Is it more like, is it trending towards the Gigi sound? Or
they'd both be fricatives, so it would work.
They'd both be what?
Fricatives, like using the friction of your mouth. She.
My goodness. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for that. Fricative. Thank you. Okay, right. So we'll just keep going. Darkness, right. I'm just picking words out now that struck me. Darkness in the Egyptian is kuku or kuku. Okay, darkness, night, cloud, storm cloud. The Yoruba word, what's that, Tommy? The Yoruba word for darkness is near identical to the Egyptian word for darkness. Kuku. Okuku. Yeah. Okuku. Chat, I don't know if you guys are listening to this. Okuku. Like, yeah. What?
That's crazy. And even in Medumba, Kikimborg, I can think of as like Black Knight. It sounds really similar.
Yeah. Kikimborg, yeah.
It does. Well, you've got that double K sound.
Yeah. The reduplication of that velar. So it's related. I mean, there's way too many of these again for it to be chance. There's just too many.
Yeah. So Facton says we're cooking. Thank you so much. It's good to know that. It's good to know, man. But it's not even us. This is the work of I mean, the world's upside down. We got sports folk, which shout out to them, good for them and everything, earning millions. All right. But people like Theophile Obenga, these should be made men. I don't know how much he's made over the course of his life, but these are the people that we should celebrate, like monetarily celebrate. Like these people are bringing to light some just some amazing things that you can actually, I'm looking at this information, I'm thinking, if the world was the right way up, we should have been reconstructing how the Egyptian language sounded. It should never have been lost. You only have to do a composite of all these different African languages to actually reconstruct. But you see quite a lot of the time, I kind of laugh at them. There's a lot of videos on YouTube how ancient this sounded and how ancient, and I always laugh when they guess how ancient Egyptian sounded, what ancient Egyptian sounded. It's like, guys, you don't know what you're talking about. You just don't know what you're talking about.
They don't. Yeah, this last part is key. Like the last part here is for his methodology.
Okay, all right. This under 7, global commentary and conclusion. Right. Brother, do you want to read it?
Yeah, sure.
Go on.
This is the sound correspondences between ancient Egyptian and Yoruba cognates are regular, and form and meaning show strong similarities. It means that ancient Egyptian and Yoruba can be traced back to a common stock older than Niger Congo, Benue Congo, Proto-Bantu, Common Bantu. Thanks to the help of ancient Egyptian, African general linguistics must go beyond these usual reconstructions in order to discover the real common stock of all African languages spoken by Black African people since Pharaonic Egypt. This is indeed the only real challenge in reconstructing one single family, including Egyptian, Cushitic, Chadic, Niger Congo, Mande, Atlantic Congo, and Kordofanian as follows.
And then he
gets into that.
Yeah,
which is again, when a lot of people they stick to these Greenbergian boundaries, but based upon the logic of conventional linguistics, you're always trying to see how certain language families relate to others through the comparative method. And with this Egypto-African, he's combining these languages into one using the historical comparative approach. And he goes on and says, a new African linguistic paradigm is urgently needed in order to classify more adequately African languages beyond Africanist and Eurocentric views, separating ancient Egypt or Kemet from the rest of Black Africa. African Renaissance implies a new scientific approach in order to build modern African humanities. This is to say that a more accurate classification of African languages on a continental scale must strictly be based upon regular sound correspondences and pre-dialectical reconstruction of a common basic root according to the universal principles and methods of historical linguistics. The job of advancing knowledge in the field of African historical linguistics is absolutely needed with good training in comparative linguistics and the Egyptian language. And he goes on to ancient scribes, intellectuals, and scholars of Kemet used to say, Heru ketu re'em helet heru. The day is short, but learn daily.
Wow.
And then he says, in French, the translation would be more dramatic. Bref est l'instant, cependant apprend à chaque instant. So close is the instant, but it depends on each instance.
Wow.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely.
It is beautiful, man. It is beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a brilliant rendition, Kamji. That's whoa. It's a mic drop. I think Sir Facton put it best earlier. It's a mic drop. I don't know if anyone wants to round off.
It's a really good paper.
Yeah, it is.
That's paper. One of many papers. His paper on Dagara, which is a language of Burkina Faso, similar to the language of the Masi people, I think is even more extensive. And also his book, which is one of my favorite books. I've been reading it. Like in the background, I actually have like a list of cognates across all languages with, the ancient Pharaonic language. So like that book is really, really, really good. Even though like it's in French for the English speakers, like if you just want to see the scientific data that he's compiled, I would highly recommend it.
Can you
is asking for the link to this paper?
And I'm saying yes to that, Mr. Blackgold. I will share the link to that paper, if possible. I'll just I'll get the papers that you're talking about from you, Kamji, and I'll link them in the description below because I'm interested in reading that material as well.
Yeah, and I also translated, some of the and I have a video on my channel called Intro to Historical or African Historical Linguistics, and I translated a lot of Obenga's introductory work to English, and I basically used 11 Labs AI to put that into like a YouTube format. So if you're interested in that, like I could send you that as well. And he kind of just goes over the basics, deals with the discovery of Indo-European, and then actually like the Pharaonic language is a lot closer to Inner Africa than like, Northern Indian languages are to English. But we know Hindi is genetically related to English. That's been proven. So like if we use the same approach, we could do it the same thing for Africa.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. If you can send, I'll link that in the description below. I normally say I will do this and I never get around to it. But I will this time. I need to link, provide the link to that video that you just mentioned on your channel, Kamji, and I'll link this paper in the description below this live. So Surfactant closes us out with $20. Thank you so much for that, Surfactant. That's I'm just really impressed and overwhelmed by the generosity of you guys tonight. He says, I have 2 computers open streaming your show. I know what you guys are doing is important to our people. I love Kamji's channel as well. That's massive.
Shout out to you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Surfactant. I urge you all, if you've not done it, there should be no reason why you're listening to this live right now and you're not subbed to the brother Kamjiverse's channel. It's literally just that name, Kamjiverse. You find it on YouTube, and you should go right now and make sure you subscribe to his channel for great content. So apart from YouTube, where else can they find you, Kamji?
You can find me on X. I'm there, here and there. You can find me on IG. I'm not as common there. I have a Discord available. I have a Patreon where like I roast people and go into some research. And I use more colorful language that I need not say on YouTube. And so, yeah, Discord, Patreon, X/Twitter, YouTube. And I made a Substack. I just have to add more of my articles to it. A lot of my articles are in draft format, but I hope to get my Substack. I will get my Substack operative, so like you could see a lot of the videos that I put in article form with all the research and links and sources, etc. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be here probably sometime in the spring. And yeah, I appreciate any and all support, and shout out to all the trills, the trillions in the building, and thank you for letting me grace this platform.
Oh no, the pleasure is all mine, is all ours. Well, Tommy, if you, I know you've not, I don't know that you've got a channel yourself, but if you, do you want to let us know where the people can hit you up? Or?
No, it's, I mean, I'm not, I don't have a sort of internet presence, but I just want to say, I'm really encouraged, Kamji. I'm really encouraged by the fact that your background is not in this space, but you've obviously done a lot of learning, a lot of digging. Really appreciate that. And information and knowledge is good. The famous is, if you don't know your history, you don't know where you're coming from. And I think a lot of people from our background suffer from the fact that we've not been well taught. But also so many of us haven't gone to do the digging, and the digging can be quite difficult to get to. So I really appreciate the effort you've put in with the knowledge that you have. So you just keep pushing it, and throwback as always. You're creating this platform for people to know and get better and understand their history. So more power to you. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you so much, Tommy. And it was short notice to get you on, and I'm so glad you were able to join us. Like I said, I've known about Tommy for a long time, and if you there's not a better person to be in the trenches with. He'll have your back. Last minute I said, "Do you want to join the stream?" and he said, "Yep, definitely coming on." So thank you for that, Tommy. That's amazing. So thank you guys, everyone, for joining us. It's been an amazing live. What I might do, this is 3 hours now, I might compile this into like a 10-minute video, which is going to be hard to do, and just like take out the keyest of key bits of what we've spoken about in this video, because I know a lot of people won't want to wait through 3 hours, but
You could put
it's really
timestamps
important.
too.
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, thank you, guys. If you just wait behind and out when I end the screen, and we can just have a little chat. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'll see you guys in the next video, which the next live, which I think will be this weekend. Actually, I've got something else lined up completely different to this that we're going to be talking about. Thank you, Sir Facton. Thank you, Azioni and Chaldean. Who else has been keying this? Mr. Black Gold. All of you guys, thank you so much. Black Rampage 2. Thank you all very much. It's been I'm just blessed to have had you on this stream contributing. So peace, everyone. Kush to Compton. It's been Trill Black. I'm out.